Let's rise. Start on the left, two on the right. Allah, Mother of the Universe. Allah, Father of the Universe. Father of love. Father of love. Truth. Peace. Freedom. And justice. Allah is my protector. My guide. And my salvation. By night and by day. Your holy prophet. Noble Ali. Islam. Prophet warns all Muslims, governors, ordered to read proclamation at each meeting. I hereby inform all members that they must send out radical, agitating speeches while at work, in their homes, or on the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet, or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet Noble Ali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out a divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Noble Ali. Islam. To be proclaimed at every meeting. Islam. I am glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There is a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim that I was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics must depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens, they are working every scheme that they can to disqualify me so they may take charge of the situation. I have notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors that attribute to the movement and uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me and the movement will be remembered. That is why I am calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can shove aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without I, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works which I have performed in the past few years. Prophet Noble Ali. To the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Islam. This is the instruction from your Prophet Noble Ali. Be faithful unto your forefathers' divine and national creed, that you would be blessed for your good deeds that you sow in the flesh. Allah is the one that judges the world, and his judgment is now on, but the weak can comprehend it not. The end of time is drawing near, so says Allah to his divine prophet, I Noble Ali. And that's why many hearts have been turned to stone. Many have eyes to see, but cannot see, ears to hear, but cannot hear, lest they will be confounded of their sins. These are trying hours now, dear Moors, and every evil spirit is moving, and they are trying every weak mind to overthrow and drag out the true foundation that has been laid, and to cause confusion in the minds of the ones that do believe. But if you have the true love of Allah and the spirit of your forefathers, you fear not what you hear or see, but will sacrifice the utmost of your very life to protect your movement and your prophet. Watch your enemies, dear Moors. Your enemies are the ones that speak against your prophet and ridicule him to the very lowest, and the ones that speak against your divine and national principles of your temples. Act accordingly, and Allah would bless you for your good work. Peace, your divine prophet, Noble Ali. Islam.
Our next speaker is a mushroom cultivator and also a martial arts expert and instructor. He owns his own institute where they teach half a dozen different types of martial arts. He's expert in all of them. And you may not know this, but they're all African-based martial arts. Okay, so it's not just like Japan and China that have martial arts. Lots of cultures have martial arts, and he's proficient in a bunch of these ones from the continent of Africa. And interestingly, I was chatting with him, and he was talking about how all cultures, martial arts, come out of their entheogenic use, out of their use of psychedelics. So, we typically talk about psychedelics as being like about peace and love and uniting the world and being one and things like this, but actually it also produces fighting styles. Okay, so it's not all peace and love. There's some fighting too. And so these things are interrelated in an interesting way that I think is underappreciated by our community. And so I wanted to come and talk to you about some of these things. Okay, for him, some things are supposed to be tough, and psychedelics is one of them. So he's going to be talking to us about that and challenge us a little bit, I hope. He will start with a little biography to tell you how he got into all of this. Okay? But he's also got lots of different messages, including that high doses, very high doses, are the way to go. Please help me welcome Kalindi Iggy.
Thank you very much. Okay, get my clicker out. All right, good afternoon. My name is Kalindi Iggy. I'm from not far, Detroit, Michigan. As Brian was saying, I'm a cultivator and a traditional African martial artist. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about how I got into this space and things like that. I've been ingesting high dose mushrooms since 1973. And, I have a little bit of experience inside of the space and have been for the last few years doing talks around the world on high dose mushrooms and how they are included inside of the psychedelic realms in space. Starting out, it was 1958, and I was in the back of my father's car with my brother, and we were like down in the seat. And I looked up over the top of the seat at the drive-in, and this is what I saw. This is from the 7th Voyage of Sinbad. Great movie, my favorite movie. But it set me on the path to knowledge, the weird, having to think about something more than just our regular 3-dimensional 5-sense reality. So what I'm going to be talking about is some of the ancient utilizations of mushrooms, of which I consider the quintessential hallucinogen of this earth. Mushrooms are the oldest. They have the greatest plenum of knowledge and information. They're 465 million years older than any plant on Earth. So when we talk about them, we talk about where they came from and how they got here. They are believed to be extraterrestrial, but also interdimensional, hyperdimensional, extra-dimensional. And they come from far, far away and a long, long time ago. So extraterrestrial spores percolating through space. The spores are some of the hardest things in nature, and they can, in the vacuum of space, be virtually immortal. And when they find a space or a place where they can liberate their knowledge, because they're a organic technology, in other words, they were created as a mnemonic device, in other words, a device of memory. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky called it the Akashic records, but we call it the records of the Acacia because it's the DMT compendium of knowledge and understanding that has given us the breach out of the proto-human into the human. And that happened on the continent of Africa. We have the oldest records of hallucinogenic mushroom use in South Africa and also in the Sahara in Algeria, a place called the Tessili Plateau at Algiers. And in that place, you have labyrinth caves where it depicts the earliest spiritual people and how they became the earliest spiritual people, because it came out of the fungi of which they ingested when grasslands were first produced on Earth, following the cattle for food, because, you know, men, it was a division of labor. Basically, men hunted and women gathered. Although, of course, if you're walking by and see a potato, you're going to pick it up. So if I'm a man, I'm not going to get the potato. No. But what happened was that men weren't really that great of, you know, they weren't great hunters. They would steal meat from when a predator attacked an animal. In between the scavengers getting their piece, they would run in and get some. They still do that in Kenya today with the Maasai. They will go in and either drive the lions off, or they will go in when the vultures and other things are coming and drive them off and grab a piece of meat. So the beginnings of this thing, we believe, as far as fungi on this planet, is a either asteroidal impact or a meteor impact that dispersed the spores into the earth, just like panspermia. You know, the sperm comes into the egg, fertilizes it, and then you get baby mushrooms in 2019. The last great climactic impact was what they call meltwater pulse 1b. That was 11,600 years ago. Before that, meltwater pulse 1a was 12,800 years ago. And this is what basically disrupted the climate, and it basically disrupted the actual living conditions of North America, where we are now. After the last ice age, the Pleistocene, you had on top of Pittsburgh a 2-mile high ice sheet called the Laurentide ice sheet. And when 4 meteors or comets came over the top of Canada and hit right in the thumb where Detroit is, about 50 miles from Detroit, was an impact that carved out Lake Erie and knocked chunks of ice moving at 12,000 miles an hour all the way down to North Carolina, which created what was called the Carolina Bays. It sent freshwater tsunamis 1,000 feet high, taller than the tallest building in Pittsburgh, moving across the United States. Now, it's a long story to this. This isn't a Younger Dryas lecture, but you have what's called impact proxies that validate at 11,600 years ago that this happened. It left exotic metals, palladium, iridium, nanodiamonds, microspherules, miniature buckyballs. All of these things show at a particular time that this happened. And why am I talking about this? Because it changed the climate in all these different places and basically the world. But Africa, Northern Africa, wasn't as affected. So in the Sahara, of which we were talking about, where we have the oldest records of hallucinogenic mushroom use, this changing of the environment created migrations. And where these migrations happen, people moved from the north into West Africa. They moved to the Nile Valley, because when we talk about ancient mushrooms, we have to talk about ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt was a psychedelic culture. Man's bodies with birds' heads, women's bodies with cows' heads. Now, was this just the rearranging of consciousness inside of a trip that they said, oh, let's make a man's body with a fish's head on it? without any precursor of knowledge. Just let's make it. When they said, they were walking around naked as the day is long. You know what? I'm tired of sleeping out here under the stars next to a fire. Let's build a pyramid. There were no pyramids around for them to look at to say, okay, well, let's make one of those. What they did was pre-dynastic Kemetic priesthoods in their sojourns on mushrooms and also DMT from the tree of life, because the Acacia nilotica, the acacia of the Nile, was the tree of life. It is what Osiris and Isis were born from, fully formed. The knowledge of these things were hallucinogenic, psychedelic, entheogenic. They drew what they saw. They went to the place. When they came back, they produced a society that they saw in hyperspace. They saw pyramids and Tekken and Ben stones. And they said, hey, you know what? We can do this when we get back to regular 3-dimensional 5-sense reality. But we got to build it out of stone. We can't build it out of light like they did in the hyperdimensional realms. We got to build it out of stone. That's why the civilization is supposedly just come out of nowhere. There's no precursors to that, because they were walking around in Sahara, no shoes, because it's a hot place, no shoes, no clothes, none of that. But then you see them in the Tessali Plateau drawing pictures of people with belts on, pants, boots with laces in them, and helmets and Batman utility belts. So where did they get this from? Were they walking around and saw a guy in a spaceship, a spacesuit? Or did they see those spacesuits in the hyperdimensional realms of which they were sojourning? Now we're going to get into this. In North America, when that impact happened, it killed most of the megafauna in North America. North America had 4 different types of elephants. These are some of the things, or some of the animals of which were killed out during that impact. You had the flat-nosed bear, which was the most horrific predator on North America, killed them out. You had the dire wolf, if you were familiar with Game of Thrones, the large wolves of which Jon Snow had and the rest of the family. Those were small in comparison to the actual dire wolves that was on the North American continent. You had the giant beaver. These were the size of beavers in relationship to a human being that were roaming around the North American continent. So delving back into this hyperdimensional, extra-dimensional realm of sojourn during actual trips that were in ancient times, Frank Drake said that there are gazillions of different types of high civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy alone. But also in the Vedas, they talk about that there are 432,000 different humanoid types just in this galaxy alone. But then you always have somebody that throws a wrench in the punch bowl, and that was Enrico Fermi. He said, well, if all these different entities are all over the galaxy, why aren't they here? Why aren't they flying through? Why don't we see them? Because super civilizations they miniaturize. So instead of talking about SETI, which is search for extraterrestrial intelligence, we talk about SEPI, which is a search for infraparticle intelligence. So what my talk is going to be about is how they brought from the virtual realms and the quantum areas knowledge back into the regular dynamic of which we live. Quantum fluctuations, particle entanglement, all of the things that we're getting into now, because we are re-emerging technologically into the realms that the ancients had and had already phantomed thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, because meltwater Pulse 1b was the impact that sunk Atlantis. Now I know people will say, well, that was just a story of Plato and the Timaeus and the Critias, and he was basically making these things up. But his ancestor Solon told it to Critias the elder, who told it to Critias the younger, who told it to Socrates, who told it to Plato. And that same younger Dryas impact information goes exactly with the sinking time of Atlantis, because it raised the water table 400 feet worldwide, because it threw chunks of ice, fresh water, into the Atlantic. It also changed the North Atlantic current, which is the prime position of what happened that changed the climate worldwide. You threw fresh water into the seawater in the Gulf and also in the Atlantic, meaning that fresh water changed the salination of the ocean. So when solar radiation hits the equator, it accumulates heat. And as the North Atlantic current brings it northward, it liberates that heat over time. But when the water became less salty, that heat was liberated before it came north and threw the world into another ice age. This is the reason why you don't have the records of mushroom use in North America in ancient times, because all those records were destroyed when this impact happened. So let's get into the story. Downscaling provides the answer to where are these extraterrestrials at. They have descended into the quantum realm during simulations. Mushrooms validate subjectively the quantum realms. That's why we need more physicists and string theorists doing high doses of mushrooms. Because they're the ones that give us the theories of what reality is. There's a professor, he was at the University of Maryland, Professor Sylvester James Gates, who was the first graduate from MIT in supersymmetry. As a matter of fact, supersymmetry was so new that Professor Gates had to teach his teachers what supersymmetry was so that they could give him his PhD in supersymmetry. But according to his supersymmetry calculations, in the basis of our reality, the same algorithms that run Google, Facebook, and the rest of them are embedded in the reality. So it is a self-fulfilling technology. They've taken what is the mycelial network, which is the internet of the earth, mycelium, fungi, mushrooms. And that knowledge, because the mushroom mycelium is sentient, what we see as the mushroom is the reproductive portion of the mushroom, the stem and the cap being female and the stem being male. Them together makes little mushrooms. And so what he says is that according to the calculations, we're utilizing the same algorithms that reality utilizes, and that we're in a simulation. But simulations embedded in simulations, embedded in simulations. And when you go into these realms under the influence of the mushroom, the psilocybin mushroom, because psilocybin mushroom, regardless of what they say in London and other places, is DMT. Psilocin is DMT. It is the ingestible form of DMT. It's not an alchemy. That's why we know it's the oldest. It's older than plants. It's older than cacti. It's older than ayahuasca. The last 5 mushrooms gave them the formula on how to produce ayahuasca. Hey, we got these 5 mushrooms left. What are we going to do? We're in the jungle. We're not producing them like we're on grasslands or in the woods or something like that. We're in the jungle. What are we going to do? Well, let's give it to the most experienced. Let's give it to the old guy. Old guy took it, shared it with the old lady. And what they did was went into those trip realms, and they came back with the formula for ayahuasca because they went into the forest or into the jungle. And anybody who's taken a high dose of mushrooms or ayahuasca, when you go into the jungle and those things start lighting up, the trees start talking. The tree is over here one moment. You think, dang, that's a nice tree. Look like it got a face in it. Then all of a sudden you turn around and look back and the tree's over here. What it did was it pulled out of the fauna and flora of the jungle and illuminated the vine and the leaf. And you put those together, but psilocybin, the mushroom, doesn't have an alchemy to it. Ayahuasca, you have a person in between you and ingesting what you're ingesting. It's not like canary grass. Canary grass is another thing we'll be talking about when we get down a little further. But these are the different areas of the quantum realm, going down from the nanometer and nanotechnology, which our phones are created out of, miracle of nanotechnology. What they're having different conferences on now is femto technology, 10 to the negative 15th, or Fermi, which is where the magic starts. That's where they're talking about replicators. So when people arrogantly say, oh, well, in 2050, we're going to have a food crisis. In 2050, you will say, as Jean-Luc Picard says in his room on Starship Enterprise, he will say, Earl Grey tea. And out of nothing, out of the virtual realms, the replicator will produce a cup. It will produce the saucer that the cup sits on. It will create water or organize water. It will heat the water to the perfect temperature and produce the formula of Earl Grey tea at the proper temperature for him to drink. And you'll be able to say the same thing. Burger and fries. Boop. From your replicator. So these are the different areas inside of the quantum world where gluons and quarks and all the other subatomic particles exist. But then there is the Planck length, 10 to the negative 35, which is where they say it is, you can't go any lower, you can't get any smaller. That's the end of it. That's the beginning. When you pair your consciousness with the DMT containing tryptamine hallucinogens, of which mushrooms are the quintessential psychedelic of the earth. It gets down below the Planck length. It goes into where the super servers are that generate the macro reality of which we are in existence. Now, everything being one is only a neighborhood. They have standalone systems that have absolutely nothing to do with this universe and those in this universe. This is a clip from Ant-Man going subatomic. Now, this is you. You have to imagine not looking at this, but being this and moving through the different subatomic realms under the influence of a high dose of psilocybin. The difficulty is with trying to convey this information is that most people who have taken psilocybin, most people who have taken the others have not taken enough to have a sufficient dose, to have a sufficient experience to be able to phantom this type of information. Now, this isn't the trip. This is on the way to the trip. You haven't hit rock bottom yet. You're flowing through different areas and magnitudes of the very, very small. This is the microverse. This is the way that we go down into the smallest of the small. You go so far down and get so small, you come out the other end big, and you're in the macro universe. These are some of the mushrooms in West Africa. This one particularly, the tame mushroom, is the mushroom of knowledge. is the mushroom of the universe. These are used by the Duna Fang, by the Fang people. This talks about it, talking about iboga paired with mushrooms, because iboga was paired with mushrooms. Iboga was used by the mandrills when the male mandrills would be ready to fight one another over a female. They would take the iboga root and eat it. And once they got to the proper informational structure that they needed to be able to spar and fight with one another, and that wasn't to the death, but they fought until they found out who was the superior, because that was part of passing on the genes to the female so that you have a forward escape through the children, that each generation becomes stronger and better. Now, these are the Fang people. National Geographic did Africa a disservice. For 100 years, for 125 years, for 150 years, they would take photographs like this. And they would say, this is what the Africans are, this is what they do. So, you're going to cook dinner, this is how you dress up. You're going to get water from the well, this is how you drink, this is how you dress up. And they said, this is Africa for 150 years. So people, oh, Africa, the dark continent, they have no knowledge. They walk around in crazy suits. But when I was presenting last month at Breaking Convention is the largest psychedelic conference in Europe, or in the UK, Europe. I showed this picture after this picture. And I said, what if National Geographic had said, these wild people, you see the red faces? Because they're eating people. They have these whips of which they beat you before they put you in the pot and before they ate you. This is a festival, just like with the Duna Fang, it's a festival. So these wild people were from London. So the Londoners really didn't have a great time with that. But what if National Geographic had did that for 100 years, said these were the wild Londoners? You wouldn't want to go see Big Ben and the bridge and the Queen and all that kind of stuff, because you would think they were going to eat you. This is Ansar, Lord of the underworld, Lord of the perfect black. He is the Neteru of the mushroom, of DMT, because he's talking about, when they say underworld, it's not from a Christian sensibility. It's not where you're going to be burned up down in hell or something like that, but it is the subatomic world. It's so small that there's no light there, because the photons of which light are produced are magnitudes above the underworld of which the triple thick darkness dwells.
I hope you like that intro right there, because we're about to go in again. We're about to go in again with some more. About to go in again with some more. Peace, Brother Eru.
Islam, my son.
So we're here.
All right.
Two. We're here, part 2. The floor is yours, Moore.
All right. I appreciate it, man. Sorry, guys, for the delay. I was a little bit behind this morning. But yeah, we're here now. It's I'm happy to present this part to you. It's a little bit more in depth. It's actually pretty perfect where I came in to that, hearing Master Kalindi talk about psilocybin as not being alchemy, as it's being the original, or the first entheogen we encountered for the purposes of advancing our knowledge and evolution, because it exists. You can have it by itself. It doesn't require dissemination into a brew, right? Like he was talking about ayahuasca. You got to take 2 things and brew them together. You got to take one being the DMT and one being the thing that allows the DMT to cross the blood-brain barrier. That's how all entheogens basically work, except for psilocybin. I should say that's how all organic entheogens really work, by combinations or forming a brew, except for psilocybin mushroom. It's the only thing you can take in that gives you the experience directly. And funny enough, today is the day where we're going to talk about the chemistry behind that. So yeah, if you got, you can always rewatch the video, but if you got a pen and a notepad, it might be good to just record your questions as we go through it, because it is quite a bit of information. And, you know, we're going to be pretty sort of basic chemistry today, but still it might come off as a little form because it's not stuff that you reviewed. Most of us have been out of school for a long time, so we'll have to go back into some of those concepts, talking about atoms and bonds and stuff like that, and enzymes and stuff like that, that you would have learned in school, but you know, that's pretty far removed for most of us. So yeah, I recommend that if you can, write your questions down so you don't forget them, and then we'll continue. So I thought that I was going to start just where we left off, but Kuju made a good point. I should probably go a couple slides back up. And feel free, by the way, to unmute yourselves anytime if you do have a pertinent question or something to say. I'm happy to answer that in the presentation. I thought I'd give a little recap for those who may have come late last time, or maybe, you know, you're a new face to the temple today, or maybe you just, you know, had some questions that were unanswered from last time. And basically what we're talking about today is the discussion on whether or not it was entheogens, our encounter with entheogens, that gave rise to Islamism, whether or not that is quintessentially what Noble Drew Ali encountered when he went to Egypt, and his recordings of the Aquarius Gospel, which, you know, if RV Bay knows, then clearly Sharif knew too, that the Akashic records were part of that gospel, were that gospel, right? The Akashic records, or the gospels, were a version of the Akashic records. And the trials that Yeshua went through in the MHK are a part of those records. So that's what our discussion was about. And we basically went through what the entheogen was, what the mushroom was, why it was important, or how we encountered it when we were in the infancy of our hominid form, we said, on the entering the grasslands on Africa, and or even in the jungles here. You know, we can talk about the origins and stuff. There's lots of interesting literature about the Inter-Africa theory as well we can get into, but essentially what we need to understand is we encountered them when our environment changed from a jungle environment to more of a grassland environment, and then different combinations of the two. And then we said, okay, well, it was important to our ancestors, which we know because it's all over their literature, and it's all over their walls, and it's all over their symbology, and it's all in their deities, and it's all in all the symbology and stuff. So we took that and we said, okay, well, let's apply it to other religions. You know what I'm saying? Like a research project, right? Are there cross references for this? And we went through the Hindustan religion. We went through Buddhism. We went through Islam. And we are currently going through Christianity, which got about halfway through. And of course, through all of those religions, we found that the symbology of the mushroom, or the entheogen, being the foundation of the mystery system or spiritual system of Kemet, was also present in all these religions. So that's kind of where we are as a recap from last time. And we're not talking about all mushrooms or all entheogens. We're talking about a particular strain that is unique in nature to us, which we will discover why in some pretty weird and amazing ways chemically, you know, probably about an hour or so. That's the psilocybin cubensis, or sometimes I think it's called the Stravera cubensis mushroom, which grows, or which grew when we encountered it, at least in this paradigm or period of history on this planet, was around the Nile region, right? As it became drier and formed grasslands. And now, of course, it's even, you know, the Sahara nearby is kind of like desert, and the Nile, you know, remains probably the most fertile of the region, most fertile area of the region. Okay, so let's go back. I thought I would just cap off. I think Kujo, let me just replay this video of Christianity for you guys. It's really short. It's the Christmas one, right? Remember that one? The Christmas one that looked at all this mushroom symbology and Christmas. I was like, well, why is there so much entheogenic symbology around Christmas? I thought it was Jesus' birthday that we were celebrating, but you know, the Christ Mass, we had come to understand the word actually being a word for the anointing oil that was used to pass on the entheogenic experience to initiates under the Gnostic system, of course, which is our system in Kemet, and of course before Rome came in, and you know, we're having a hard time dealing with the inhabitants of that region, you know, when no one's afraid of you because everyone's on these mushrooms all the time. You know, it's hard to conquer a people who you know, who aren't afraid and who essentially you can't fool and easy conquer because their belief system is so strong in terms of understanding who they are and who their ancestors are and all that sort of stuff. So they had to change what Christianity was. When I say Romans, I'm not talking about Europeans, by the way. I'm probably talking about Moors. There were many Moorish dynasties in Rome. Okay, many Moorish Caesars of Rome. So this is more like infighting sort of stuff. But I think that's another conversation. So let's go back and play this video about Christmas and all the different mushroom symbology that exists around this holiday of Jesus' birthday, quote unquote. Yep.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. With the kids in the valley and everyone telling you be of good cheer. It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's the happiest season of all. With those holidays and happy years, my friends come to call. It's the happiest season of all. There'll be parties hosting ourselves for toasting and carol.
Yeah. So there we go. Once again, replaying that video and even taking a look once again at all the symbology dealing with the color codes of the Amanita muscaria mushroom within the hierarchies of the Christian church. All right, the mushroom there in the video, and mushroom over here. So obviously, the cabinet mushroom there, and all this sort of stuff. All right. Okay, so we then went to talk about we had talked about sorry, in the Psychedelic Gospels, the fact that the mushroom symbology is all through Christianity, especially in early Christianity. We just kind of slowed it, guys. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. But even in early Christianity, we saw that. Oh, look, secret history of hallucinogens in Christianity. And so this is a commonly, I don't know about commonly known, but it's, you know, it's relatively well documented. And you know, we'll talk later on about some of the, a lot of the churches' paintings in Europe describe the fruit in the Garden of Eden being a mushroom, right? So it's, you know, it's all, the literature's all over the place. It's nothing that's completely new. I wouldn't say that it's common information, but it definitely is not new information. Okay, so next we were talking about Jacob Boehme. Jacob Boehme is an important figure in early Christianity, and he's a mystic. So let's just read a little bit about him. Jacob Boehme, right? 1600s he was born. German philosopher and Christian mystic, had visions which revealed to him a special vocation from God. The spiritual structure of the world, the relationship between God, man, good and evil, and the unity of the cosmos. From his artwork, from his artwork and testimony, we can deduce the source of his visions, or what some refer to as sacred schizophrenia. Right. These are some of the quotes from people at the time who were being initiated into the Gnostic system, or the Gnostic rites, the mystic rites, right? The early Christians who we hear of when they say, oh, Christians were being punished. Christians were being thrown into the gladiator arenas and that sort of stuff. Christians were being punished and thrown, but not the ones that we perceive to be the ones who are being punished. Not the ones who are running around spreading the gospel of the man born again. What they were talking about was the fact that, well, this is what Christianity really was, and of course they were persecuted for that. In 1/4 of an hour, I saw and knew more than if I had spent any years at a university, where I saw and knew the being of all things. While I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw, for I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the spirit. Remember what Quinty was talking about just now, with the shape of subatomic particles and seeing those things in the quantum realms. That's what he's talking about. And the shape of all shapes says they must live together like one being. And that's the Black Elk Society. We touched on them a little bit earlier on as regards to Noble Drew Lee visiting Toronto and the Elk Society there. I learned more about psychology in the 5 hours after taking these mushrooms than in the preceding 15 years of studying and doing research in psychology. Timothy Leary. And again, we have Jacob Bohm. I never desired to know anything of the divine majesty. I sought only after the heart of Jesus Christ, that I might hide himself therein from the wrathful anger of God and violent assault of the devil. Now that quote is important because it illustrates the fact that we know already from what he's doing here, this symbol, which is the mushroom form of a star, we know already from that, and from the description of him above as a mystic, and from the first quote above him, above that, these other quotes here, that we know that when he says Jesus Christ, what he's referring to. We know he's referring to the teacher, which is the mushroom itself, right? Jesus, he's saying Jesus Christ, Jesus is the mushroom, right? It's the Christ is the mushroom. Jesus, he saves, the Christ saves. That's what essentially we're dealing with here when he says, after the heart of Jesus Christ. He's talking about the heart of the mushroom and what it teaches. But it would be hard to deduce that, someone just seeing this picture, not understanding the symbology, which is why we spent so much time talking about it last time. And I think we covered this one as well. So you see the cross, and hidden so clearly within it to those who have taken a look at the symbology that we've seen so far is the mushroom hidden right there in the cross. You know, if you didn't know what it was, you look at it and think, oh, that's weird. Why did he draw it like that? And that would be it. You would never consider it again. But knowing what we know now, we know that this is something specific. There's a bird there, right, imitating the falcon, imitating Haru and the Haru concept. The tree above it, because the mushroom provides the soil, right? And the heart of Jesus Christ, or the heart-shaped herb, as we heard of in Black Panther. Right? And here we go once again, the eyes. Always the eyes. Remember what Hagar, the foremother of Muhammad, exclaimed, "You are El Roy. You are the God of seeing, the power of sight." Osiris, the many-eyed, the vision that we get from the mushroom, the physical vision and the metaphysical vision. And here I am. I'm just, trying to drive home that, to me, these are all the same. Many people might see this mushroom lecture or lectures like it, and they say, I don't believe it, and that's cool, that's fine. But to me, how much more obvious do they have to be? Because all of this stuff is an important part of our culture. And I got lots of, theories about how it relates to the demise of our culture, which, we'll have to save that for maybe the in-person class and stuff. But as it became scarcer and populations grew and cities boomed, it just became further and further removed from the awareness of the regular denizen, the regular citizen, the regular inhabitant. It became further and further and further removed to the point of almost sort of myth or legend in the minds of regular people who are just having kids. And now commerce is booming, right? Cities are finally being raised from the being built up from the ground. It's exciting. The world is changing. It's a setting time, and the mushroom is easily pushed to the background. So it's only a tiny group of people are using it, and that group gets smaller and smaller. relative to the size of the growing population, you know. But you have like 10,000 years later, you know, the guy who builds sidewalks and stuff, he has no idea about any of this. He went to school to build sidewalks. He went to school to learn to be an engineer, this or that. He's removed from this part of government and becomes smaller and smaller. That's sort of what happened. But they're all the same image. And again, we talked about the heart-shaped herb, right? We all know what happens when Black Panther takes the heart-shaped herb, right? An asteroid hit the Earth in the movies, and it deposited vibranium, which caused certain herbs to mutate and produce this powerful herb that when you take in, this is what you see. You eat the heart-shaped herb, right? You eat the mushroom under the acacia tree, right? The Akasha tree, the Akashic records. Basically, what it means is you're taking in the Akashic records, you're buried there, and this is where you end up, right? In the house of your forefathers, in the house of Ra. All right, so I included the slide like this with the picture of the Akasha tree and the previous picture of the heart-shaped herb and Jacob Boehm's cross to emphasize something, which is why the Akasha records are called thus. The Akasha tree is a DMT. It's got DMT in the leaves. It's got DMT in the bark. We're going to come back to DMT and the chemical stuff that Glenn was talking about in a moment. But here is the DMT, the lotus flower. If you look up this research paper, and it's here now, so we can take a look at it. But basically, I think I talked about this more on the slide. It produces the necessary substances that inhibit our body's breakdown, or that stop our body's breakdown of DMT, because DMT is a tryptamine, and there are certain chemicals that our body produces when it's ingested orally, right? That break down that tryptamine. Monoamine oxidase breaks down that tryptamine very rapidly, so it can never cross into the blood-brain barrier, through the blood-brain barrier. It gets broken down. This is the flower, the lily flower, right? You see people meditating in the yoni position with the lilies on top of them, and the blue lily, right? The blue flower. It's a pretty big esoteric symbol in different mythologies and different cultures, particularly the cultures out of Hindustan. But right, lotus position, right? Yoga, the lotus position. Yoga is originally an entheogenic practice. Doing yoga is great for exercise and stuff now, but yoga was not just meant to be a form of physical exercise. It was a spiritual exercise that it was performed under the influence of the entheogens. And the blue lotus flower, right? The lotus position. That sound. We're gonna talk about that. That sound later on. We get into the manifestations of reality in the tree of life in the book of Genesis, right? What that has to do with all of this. The blue lotus flower, the lotus position, where the sound is made. That flower provides the right stuff to inhibit, or in other words, stop the breakdown of these chemicals when we ingest this tree in a brew. They brew them together, and that's how it works. So the movie it simplifies things. It makes it seem that the eating the heart-shaped herb automatically provides you with the vision or with the power. It automatically transports you to the realm of the ancestors or the quantum realm, like Master was talking about, or whatever the case may be. However, this comes into why it is a critical part of. It was always a critical part of Moorish culture, particularly was an important part of Moorish culture, because consuming it is actually it's a trial, right? And this is the link to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which talks about the in-depth nerdy stuff behind this, right? If you read the comic books, just like the combat trial that King T'Challa's got to go through when someone else challenges his throne. It's a trial to ingest these entheogens. It is not an easy experience, right? And as it says here, the journey to the ancestral plane is a vision quest of sorts, as is the ritualistic burial of the body as a consciousness undergoes the experience. Those who do not survive stay buried. Those who do awake with a heightened sense of agility, strength, and endurance, along with the ability to see in the dark, tracked by scent, and the works, right? Again, this whole concept of seeing, mentioned before, the darkness of David. Though I travel through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. While as I travel through the darkness, I see no evil, because the mushroom provides the vision. Osiris, the many, it always comes back to this eye thing, eh? The mushroom cap, the eye of Haru. It always comes back to seeing, the god of seeing, El Roy. It's always about, goes back to that. But essentially, it is a trial, and they couldn't kind of make that clear in the movie, but that's what it is. And particularly, psilocybin is the original, but it has taught us about how to use other entheogens. And that may be one of the reasons why we stopped using entheogens, because people were not surviving the rituals. Children were dying, most probably, because of the change in the environment that the entheogens were being provided in. And there are other ones that deal with amazing things. Because entheogens can be used to do all sorts of amazing things. They can cure traumas in the blink of an eye, with things like ibogaine. And if we have time later on, we'll talk about that. But some of them are very dose specific in terms of danger. Psilocybin is fine. You can never kill yourself with psilocybin. You're perfectly fine physically. But some of them, like ibogaine, they'll kill you if you have too much need. They'll feed you ibogaine till you're right at the verge of death, so that way you can have the trial experience and still come back unharmed. But anyway, that's what that whole stuff deals with, right? The heart-shaped herb and the acacia tree and the lotus flower. One thing I wanted to mention: the heart-shaped herb may be mythologized as given to the people of Wakanda, which we know is an American name, but the panther, which you know is an American feline, god Bast, or some such. But sure would soon be able to tell you that the reality is the plant is probably a cousin of the lily. The lily. The heart-shaped herb is probably a cousin of the lily, one that mutated due to exposure to the vibranium, right? And of course, that's just dealing with, the polymerization of this stuff. And again, this whole concept of the Black Panther, right? We know that the word is an American word referring to us. Panthers are indigenous to America. Asteroids hit it. Actually, asteroids hit Africa too. They hit Africa. Mostly, they've hit America in our time here as hominids, but they've also hit Africa. They've hit South Africa. And we'll talk about that later on in relation to the Garden of Eden. But yes, the asteroid provided the catalyst for the mushroom to sprout, right? Common theme. And again, this is what we talked about this earlier: seraphim and cherubim. Here's a serpent's tail, right? The fiery serpent, because its tail is right there. There's the tail of the serpent. Okay, moving on. Can you believe it? Yes, it's true. Sir Arthur and Gawain and Sir Gawain and Sir Arthur, the Green Knight, those whole mythologies of ancient Europe, looking at the Knights of the Round Table and the Holy Grail, right? The quest for the cup that Jesus Christ drank from. Can you believe that? The Holy Grail, right? That's essentially what it is. It's the cup that Jesus the Christ drank from at the final supper, before the betrayal by Judas, all that sort of stuff. The Holy Grail, where did the Holy Grail go? Yeah, all these Da Vinci codes, and by Dan Brown's writing all these novels about, the different quote unquote conspiracies around the Jesus Christ crucifixion and burial. And where did Jesus go? Well, where did his children go? Where did Mary go? And where did the cup go that he drank from? That's what the Holy Grail mythology is all about. This is very old mythology. It's ancient. It's Europe. It's probably 500 to 1,000 years old, maybe, maybe even older, something in that range, right? 1,000 sort of AD period in Europe, the Dark Age period in Europe, some might say, depending on where you are. The Holy Grail. Well, look at this. If you let the mushroom mature, that's what it becomes. It becomes a cup. This is a great book. I wouldn't say it's a great book. It's a good book with interesting references about the identity of Merlin, Arthur's mage, and the relationship between the Holy Grail and Merlin and the mage and nature and the Ammonites and the scary mushroom, essentially looking at all the literature and saying the Holy Grail was the Ammonites mushroom that was turned. It matures, it turns upside down. It can collect water from the rainfall. Of course, if you when talk about the bubbling spring, right, that produced the anointment that was drunk from by the initiates in the Gnostic Gospels. Well, if you were to boil amanita, you have to boil it, and you separate the constituents in such a way that you can consume the mushroom's constituents. Upturned mushroom, you drink from it, and boom, you get the experience. So this is sort of what the Holy Grail is about. The Holy Grail being essentially the matured amanita mushroom. So if you guys haven't seen this documentary, you should watch it. It talks about the origin, the Christian or the African origins of Christianity by, it's not an archaeologist, I think he's an archaeologist actually, Dr. Ashraf Kwesi, who travels there and puts on this great documentary in 2 parts, looking at how Christianity originated in Africa. Now the research is great, the things he shows are awesome, but he doesn't even touch. There's so much mushroom symbology in the documentary he doesn't touch on because it's just not a part of his experience. It's not something that was prevalent, I guess, at the time that he made it. And so you'll watch it and you'll see all this mushroom stuff. Look at the stem and the cap. To us now, it's so obvious. Look at that. Babies don't have halos. Come on. The stem and the cap. Here's the stem. Here's the cap. Right. It's so obvious to us now. You just want to scream at the screen. It's Dr. Qureshi. It's not just the symbology they stole. They're talking about something practical, right? Anyway, interesting lecture to watch. So you definitely should. And Catholic Church stole this. This is the monogram of Christ in the Catholic Church. It's basically the symbol for resurrection, right? The cross and the P. Here it is in its original form, the cross and the P. It's a penis, actually, right? Homeboy, sorry, here's packing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He's confident. He's good with dying. He's lived a good life. This guy has. Here's the X and there's the P, right? Right. The shaft of the penis and the actual and the mushroom head, we'll say, just like this. All right. And there's a beetle, of course, and below the beetle is what? The sun disk or the mushroom cap. Again, these are some images because the symbol of Lazarus, Lazarus, Jesus returning Lazarus from the dead. That story. Lazarus is really El Azar or El Azel or Aziel, depending on the pronunciation. But Lazarus is essentially a Sar. It's the Semitic. It's the word Lazarus that we say in the Semitic languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, is pronounced El Azel or Elazar, E-Z-A-R. It's a Sar, and that's the whole story that they took off the wall. And here is the penis of a Sar and the mother Aset coming to take from it to give birth to Heru in the mythology. And again, we talked about this already, but that whole Asar mythology, right, and Heru mythology, the Lion King is a pretty good approximation of that. Oh yeah, this book is excellent, man. You guys, I gotta read this one if you had a chance to. This book didn't touch on the mushroom stuff again, but it touches on other really important concepts about the birth of nothingness, or the birth of something from out of nothingness, and how our ancestors understood consciousness. which of course that knowledge came to them through the DMT experience. Just more images, right? We'll talk more about this sun stuff in a little bit. You see the eyes, and he's corrupted. He who hath favored our undertaking, right? We all know about this. The year there, right? The year that it says 1776, right? I think that's the year. And the eye and the, right? It's not a circle anymore, it's a triangle, but it's just stylized. The circle within the circle, right? The eye within the circle and the rays coming out, right? Eye within the circle and the rays coming out, the rays coming out, circle. On the church, the mushroom, the real mushroom, and the mushroom in the church, right? Same symbol, stem, cap, circle in the circle, and the rays coming out. Stem, cap, circle in the circle, and the gills coming out. All right, so we're going to move from Christianity now and talk about Judaism. Judaism in terms of the Ashkenazi form of Judaism. You know, I want to make sure I make that clear. We'll talk about the Moorish Israelite connection later, but this is the Ashkenazi perspective on the Shemitic people and their Shemitic bloodline, quote unquote. These are all pretty great books that deal with our people being in Europe. People are always surprised whenever I say, well, I love Europe. Well, why love Europe, man? Europe is so, you know, they're colonialists. They're like, well, I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can say that about any place that's occupying the natural land right now, but Europe is our homeland too. Why should I deny that, right? Like Coos used to always say, you know, why would you claim a couple things on the table to take home with you if the table is yours? Claim the whole table. You know, Europe is our home too. And these are a lot of the books that deal with us in Europe and deal with us as Shemitic people, sorry. Take them all in, especially this one. This is a hugely important one. This one's big too, man. Anyway, we're going to talk about that. The British, or the Ishbrit, which in Hebrew is what? The people of the covenant, right? That's what Ishbrit refers to, the people of the covenant. And this word means people, this word means covenant, vice versa, but British is the Ishbrit, right? The people of the covenant. We all talk about the fact that our ancestors came here and established countries. Our ancestors, the Shemites, right? The people of the covenant, the real Shemitic people, came to these parts of the world, or already in these parts of the world, and established kingdoms and stuff. Okay, so there you go. Ish equals man, Brit equals covenant. People of the covenant, the British, people of the covenant. Now, let's take a look at astronomy here for a moment, or even maybe a little bit of astrology too. I guess it is astrology more than anything else. Now, Saturn, the ringed planet, the Lord of the Rings. Saturn is the Lord of the Rings in the Babylonian tablet. Saturn of Babylon, that's their star, that's their symbol. We all know the Lord of the Rings deals with ancient Europe, because we all know from the work of this wonderful man right here that we are the hobbits, right? We're the pygmy, the Twa, the Batwa people, right? Of the Kojin people who traveled up there tens and tens of thousands of years ago to establish countries there, societies there. We are the hobbits. The scholarship says that we are the hobbits. That word refers to use to our ancestors who were small, the pygmy, the Twa people, right? The Kojin DNA people. Lord of the Rings. But look, when you flip the Saturn upside down, what do we get? Isn't that the Eye of Ra right there? The mushroom cap, the circle within the circle. Shabbat. Means Sabbath. And also Saturday. Now, the thing about the Sabbath days, we consider that we look at that day as being the day of rest, right? The day that God rested. But like we say, okay, well, Friday, for example, is our Moorish American Sabbath, quote unquote, right? Or Saturday is a Sabbath of the Hebrew people. it's a language, right? Israeli nationals, right? Sabbath is Saturday in the Jacobite tradition, Shemitic tradition. Sundays is the Christian Sabbath day. But the thing is, if you read the Torah carefully, the Sabbath is not a day. The Sabbath deals with the moon cycle. The moon cycle. And every 28 days is a new moon cycle. And depending on the month that you're in, the new moon, the celebration of new moon, begins at the start of the moon cycle. There's no moon in the sky. You can't see it. It's 1 or 2 days depending on the month, depending on how many Sabbaths have passed, in other words, right? The new moon begins the cycle of the Sabbath. There's no moon in the sky. That's called a new moon. And then at each week of the month after that, every 7 days you get another one. So you start with the new moon is 0. That's ground 0. The first Sabbath is the first quarter moon. The second Sabbath is the full moon. The third Sabbath is the third quarter moon. The last Sabbath of the month is just the last sliver of the moon. And what is the shape of the last sliver of the moon? It's a crescent. Where have we seen this before? This symbol of the crescent, right? Or the horns. The crescent moon is the horns. We can even see the shape of the disc in between the horns right here. This is the last of the Sabbath days prior to the new moon. This is the last of the Shabbats prior to the new moon. I just was being facetious here, but just to show, this is the last day of the Sabbath that we get. The last Sabbath of the month. It's the last sliver of the moon. It's a crescent. It's horns, isn't it? And of course, when you add that to the fact that Shabbat and Shabbatai means Saturn, right? Shabbat is Sabbath. Shabbatai means Saturn, right? Shabbat being the Sabbath, the celebration of Saturday, the celebration of Saturn, leaves this. Here's a symbol of the last Shabbat with the star of Shabbat. The star of the Sabbath in the Babylonian Talmud tradition is this, the Lord of the Rings, the circle in the circle, the mushroom cap. And we've seen this symbol, haven't we? The crescent with the circle in the circle above it at 10,000 times already. Remember the Sabbath day. Remember the Shabbat day and keep it holy. Exodus 20:18, right? Remember the old time religion and keep it holy. And we get these words for more in the Hebrew language. Teacher, luminous body or luminary, light, brightness. This is called the star of Shabbat because you can see it sometimes, right? Look up into the sky because it's so bright, it shines like a star, like Venus does, And we know already the relationship between these words, more. All this stuff is the same thing. The illuminated one. The star of Shabbat. Lord of the Rings again, right? Even on the cover of Tolkien's book in the authorship, what do we get? We get the eye in the circle. The upside down cap. Here's the stem right here. These lines, right, straight lines form the stem. Here's the cap. And the all-seeing eye within the circle in the circle. All the same thing, right? Alchemical symbology to this day. That's the sun, and that's the moon. That's the sun, that's the moon. The star and crescent of Islam. How many times have we seen it already? Lord of the Rings. Saturn is Lord of the Rings. Here's more of me being seen. Here we go. Here the Ishbit right here, right? Sauron, Lord Sauron came to disrupt their covenant. They weren't having it. So they had to defend themselves against Sauron. Right? Of course, the ring gives anybody access to Sauron's power. It's just the way that Sauron uses it. But the ring gave What happened when Frodo put the ring? He turns invisible. What does he access? Right, that realm of being invisible, outside of the five senses. That's the Lord of the Rings. Whoever holds the mushroom, he's the Lord of the Rings. Right? Yeah. If you eat the mushrooms, you're the Lord of the Rings now. And again, I just wanted to show the symbolism, right? Stem and cap symbolism. We've gone over 1,000 times already. Elves, remember who we all love the elves in Lord of the Rings, right? Great, it's cool, man. Great creatures. It's a lot of interesting characters in Lord of the Rings. This is from a research paper. It's a this is Journal of Psychopharmacology, and it surveys the entities encountered when patients were provided with DMT. And people are provided with DMT in all sorts of clinical settings, often for the dealing of anxiety or depression. If you've got a terminal illness, you're fearing death, you know, they can provide you with DMT to quell people of their fear. Because like I said, DMT gives you subjective proof that there is something more, right? Nobody else gets the proof. That's why it's subjective. Only you get it. But it is proof for yourself that there is something more. And you got to ask yourselves, would we be living life the same way if this was something that everybody knew? If everybody on earth knew that this was just one small piece of the journey, knew for a fact in themselves, not worried about heaven and hell, not worried about, you know, getting a big house and a big car, and knowing that's not important, because what's important is what happens to you after, because there is an after. Wouldn't it change the way people live their lives, right? They'd be living their lives to chase character, because that's all you have with you, right? In those realms, you appear as your character. You've got a great character. You're surrounded by, that's what you're surrounded by. You're surrounded by the things that you're drawn to. You have no physical body. So what do people see when they look at you? They see your character. That's how you be living your life. That's why they don't want people having this stuff. We'll be living it for material things. So I thought I would just put together a small little snapshot of the symbology in pop culture, because that's important too, because it's not just for the religions. What about if you're a secular person? Well, how does this apply to you? Well, it applies to you because you use it all the time too. You don't even know. The stuff that you love and you think is cool, your hobbies and stuff, your heroes, they're all entheogenic based. Here is the great king, the god king, Xerxes, and 300. What do we have here, folks? Does not look like an Amanita muscari mushroom to you. Here is the stem, and here is the dang cap. Look at that. It's so obviously differentiated. Here, it's like looking at Toad from Super Mario, right? Xerxes is wearing a mushroom over his head, and he's standing in front of a giant mushroom. Here's a stem, here's the cap. Look at that, it's huge. And of course, here's the cattle. Why? Because they're giving birth to the mushroom. I know they give birth to psilocybin and not Amanita, but I'm just saying it's stylized. But it's. I didn't even see this mushroom. I was watching 300 one day, and my girlfriend says, "Hey, isn't that a mushroom?" And I said, "Where?" I said, "I can't see. Where's it?" She says, "Right there, behind the guy." And I looked. I said, "Holy shit! There's a fucking mushroom there, man, right behind him." I didn't even see it my first time. She sees it more than me now. She hasn't even gone on a journey yet, because it's everywhere when you know how to look for it. Here's the cattle, here's the mushroom, here's the man. The illusion mysteries, right? Going to the Greco-Roman concepts. Because of course we taught them these mysteries, right? We taught them the illusion mysteries. Yeah, I got a lot of links here because I want to click on them, but since last time I took so much time going through this thing, I thought, let me just get through the lecture and see if I can even get through it before I go off on tangents, as I tend to do already, and I'm sorry for that, about where I'm finding this stuff. Because you can always go back later. I shouldn't be wasting your time. I'm actually trying to get through the lecture, so we can come back if you guys want to. I'm just skipping over it, but there is a link there if you look this stuff up more if you want to. I can send you all the links. I can send you all the papers and links. Just hit me up. You have my contact information. I'll be happy to forward over everything I got. There's tons of research that I looked at when designing this, and I'll be happy to hand it out to you. So what are the illusion mysteries? Well, let's read. This actually worked for over 2 millennia, keeping them so secretive, we're still not exactly sure what went on there. What we do know is that participants were indelibly altered by their fleeting glimpse into after-death states of consciousness, to die, then to walk briefly among the gods, to see as they do, seeing, Elroy, the god of seeing, then return, reborn. To do this, they drank a psychedelic brew of Kikion that bloomed in divine fire deep in their guts, creating fantastical visions of dancing eternity. This is a different entheogen that it's basically a mold. Of course, mold is a fungi, isn't it? Right? It's a fungelic entheogen as we do, because that's where the information structures are in the fungi, right? You know. So anyway, no one knows for certain what was in it, but by far, science's best educated guess is an ergot mold similar to psilocybin mushrooms. And here is Demeter passing the mushroom to Persephone as she begins to enter Hades, into the underworld, to search for, I forget who it is she's searching for. She's going there to search for someone that she's lost into the underworld. And Demeter says, well, take the mushroom with you. That will be your guide. And there it is, mushroom right there. Zoroastrianism, legend of Zorro. So that whole concept comes out of the Persian, spiritual system of Zorro, who, there was Moses, there was Rama, there was Muhammad, there are all sorts of different, you could say, people who attained the degree of prophethood. Well, Zorro was one of them, and he went into the area that we would have called Persia at the time, and had his own Muhammad, Jesus sort of thing going on with haters and lovers and, people trying to kill him and all that sort of stuff, right? Teaching the truth to the people, all that sort of stuff. This is their story. And if you read it, it sounds exactly the same as the story of Yahshua or Krishna or anything else, right? Immaculate conceptions are involved in some of these stories. 12 disciples it's the same stuff. Anyway, Russian archaeologists found and restored a 2,000-year-old Zoroastrian tapestry in a burial site in the Xiongnu, the famous nomads of Mongolia and Central Asia, showing a priest approaching the altar, holding up a sacred mushroom. According to Natalia Polosmek, the chief researcher on the project, the divine mushroom embroidered on the carpet resembles the well-known psychoactive species Psilocybe cubensis. The weight of evidence suggests that soma, the ancient ritual drink, has been prepared from the mushrooms of a family of Strophaericae, which contains the unique nervous system stimulator psilocybin. Of course, we talked about the nervous system stimulation that went down when you eat psilocybin, how rowdy it gets you. But this right here, that is Zorro. And look at Zorro. Isn't that a sombrero out of the Mexican culture, which is one of the strongest psilocybin cultures in the world? The sombrero that Noble Drew Ali wore, right? It's a mushroom cap. It's a stem and a mushroom cap, and here are the hands, right? We see those images of the mushroom stems growing from the mushroom stem and the cap, right? You can see it, and here is Zorro. If you click on these links, you just type this into Google, it'll pop up the picture of Zorro handing the mushroom over. This is for guys who are big nerds like me and love Star Wars. This is some of the Jedi, right? Flip it upside down, and you get the yoni concept, the lingam and the yoni, right? Look carefully, the shape. Close at the top and round, open at the top, open at the bottom, and straighter. Here's a bit more stylized, but still, right? The sort of in and out shape. And here's a line, the stylized star in between the horns or the wings here. And here's a line, right? The stylized star. And if you flip it the right way, then you actually get what it is. And here we are, the horns and the star. The horns and the star, because we all know who's the leader of the Jedi, the green one, the Al-Hid, Yoda, Asar, the green one. The green one leads the Jedi, and this is the green one symbol. The crescent, the star, and the crescent. Always the star and the crescent. Stylized, yes, but conceptually, it is similar, if not the same. Even look how high up the crescent goes, all the way to the tip. Look how high the crescent goes, all the way to the tip. This one, all the way to the tip, right? Goes up very high. Crescent over the star. Star right in between the two crescent tips. Star right between the two crescent tips. Right? Symbol of the Sith. The circle in the circle and the gills coming from the circle, or the rays coming from the circle. Yes, I know it's stylized. I know it's not exactly the same, but conceptually, you have to ask yourself, why is the concept always the same? Look at that, the broken circle, within the circle, the circle having the rays coming out, the circle having the rays coming out, It's conceptually, we got to ask ourselves, you think Noble Drew Lee knew about all this stuff, and when he made this symbol, he didn't know about this? The guy who spent 10 years, we've spent, what, 3 hours talking about Egypt and all the mushroom symbology there? What about the guy who spent 10 years there? He didn't see the symbology? Of course he saw the symbology. My man was first in line. That's actually a great story I encountered recently about visitors who go to Egypt at the time Drew Lee was there and encounter people who talk about Drew Lee being there. I gotta find it. I gotta send it to you guys because it's crazy. I wanted so bad to include it in the lecture, but because I'm already, we're already got too much, and I didn't. But shoot, man, could you remind me afterwards so I can forward that story? Captain America's shield, circle in the circle. How much time do you have to spend here? Let's not spend too much time here. The eye of Agamotto, the Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is so full of mushrooms, it makes me sick. I can smell the mushrooms coming off the damn screen when I watch the movie because it's everywhere in Doctor Strange. Look at the shape of the Book of Cagliostro, or the spell that is taught how to use the eye of Agamotto, right? Look at that, the horns and the circle in the circle, the horns and the mushroom cap, the horns and the great eye, the eye of Agamotto, right? Look at this. It's the same symbol, crescent, star, horns, star, mushroom cap, eye. Look at him lying there. He falls in the movie right in the middle of a mushroom cap symbol. I mean, shoot, I saw it, I almost laughed out loud. He's a straight body. Here's the stem. Here's the cap. It's the halo behind the saints, right? It's just, I mean, look at it. It's the exact same thing. It's just crazy how much they took from the walls, right? And our symbols, all psychedelic symbology. Thor's hammer. Yes, Thor's hammer is the mushroom cap. Why? Because Thor's hammer gives him the power. It recognizes him. The mushrooms recognize you after a time when you keep going back. Furthermore, who is Thor really? He's not this modern European. Thor is Shango, the god of thunder. Shango, because the mushrooms grow after the lightning. The mushrooms grow after lightning storms. Shango brings the lightning storm, which brings the mushroom, the axe. Here's Captain America with his mushroom axe and his mushroom cap shield. Shango, the god of thunder. In our mythology, that's in our Moorish mythology, that's what Shango is. He's the mushroom. Here's Super Mario. Pop! Look at that. Here he is with his mushrooms. The Smurfs. I swear some of these guys wear turbans sometimes, but I remember the show Acrylic Blue living in mushroom houses. Really? Really? Blue living in mushroom houses? Living in Amanita houses, it's so obvious. It's red or white, like mushroom cap. Smurfs are blue. Come on. Even the flags of Morocco I found interesting. I was like, look at that. Right, different flags, different dynasties and whatnot. Right, I thought that was all very interesting. And the evolution and the shield, Captain America going through its evolution too. That was all interesting. Here's a picture of a relic that was unearthed from Bulgaria, 2000. And it's 2,500 years old. All across this cap are Negroid images, they say. They said, why are negroid faces in this gold cap? Why are they plastered, in the gold cap? Why? Circle in the circle. Why? Why negroid faces? This is our stuff, man. Bulgaria, because we were there. Right, read Allison's book about quote unquote black indigenous people in that part of the world. We were there. This was found, an item found in, let's read it here. The entire process of the beginning of human life is illustrated on the circumference of both sides with incredible accuracy. This is an artifact found in South America recently, okay? An artifact found in South America. Look at the shapes, okay? The entire process of the beginning of human life is illustrated on the circumference of both sides with incredible accuracy. Type this into Google so the article could pop. The purpose of male and female reproductive organs, the moment of conception, development of the fetus inside the womb, and the birth of the baby. Both sides of the disc are covered in illustrations of the intrauterine fetal development in all stages, including pictures of a sperm and female egg. Local citizens discovered the drawn covered tablets not far from the Ecuadorian city of Cuenca, in underground tunnels and chambers located throughout the jungles. The priests also claimed an ancient system of underground tunnels 200 kilometers long from Cuenca to the jungles. Now, underground tunnels, if we built them, why did we do so? We did it to escape the cataclysms of the meteor showers that took place during the Younger Dryas impact, most likely, right? Because the entire continent was, a big chunk of the continent was covered in this meteor shower that induced the second ice age, the Younger Dryas period, right? The Dryas being a flower that blooms in cold climates. Meteor shower hit the earth and it flipped the climate. It began the process of a climate flip. And this meteor shower destroyed all the megafauna, the saber-toothed tigers, the giant short-faced bears, the dire wolves, all the stuff you see in Game of Thrones, and those great beasts of the American continent, many of them were destroyed. The megafauna were destroyed in this cataclysm that we perhaps knew was coming because the mushrooms, we buried deep and we recorded our information and knowledge on these mushroom-shaped discs. A lot of information on human genetics is strung on the outside of the disc, including cellular division and the evolution process. Strange is that information could not be seen with the naked eye, but under a microscope or other advanced optical instrument. What advanced optical instruments did we have at this period of time? What gave us the vision, the sight? What gave us the name of Anu, the priest of the quantum realms? The atom, the smallest portion of a chemical, the atom. What gave us the vision to be as small as one? To see things that you could not see unless you were looking under a microscope. The vision, the mushroom gave us the vision. The current level of the mushroom put us in the quantum realms to see this stuff, to know about this stuff that we couldn't see. The current level of knowledge of humanity does not allow such a possibility, which induces a certain aura of mystery on how to obtain the information by culture that did not have the technology to access the advanced knowledge. Look this article up. Very interesting. All right, so before we get into our talk about chemistry, finally, the pine cone. I'm talking about the pine cone now because the pine cone is an important I don't know if you could say pop culture, but definitely mythological culture symbol for enlightenment. And you'll see it in lots of places. You see it in the Pope's staff. You see it, look, I think this is Gilgamesh. Don't quote me on that. This is Nimrod, I think, actually. But you see it in different mythologies, the pine cone. So let's just talk about it briefly and how it leads us into our next topic. So this has been a symbol for enlightenment, fertility, and mortality in the third eye, due to its resemblance to the pineal gland. How do we even know what a pineal gland looks like at the time we started using this symbol? Maybe because our ancestors were doing surgeries and saw the pineal gland, or it could just be because we saw the shape of the pineal gland through using the mushroom. It's also an expression of the foundational compression expansion ratio of the universe. The sequence, if you look at a pine cone from the top, kind of looks like this, right? It spirals out into this sequence of numbers, which are the Fibonacci sequence, right? Where every number is the sum of the two preceding numbers. And the phi ratio, which is the essentially the quotient, what you get when you divide each pair of subsequent Fibonacci numbers, right? The golden spiral, this number that is equated with the coming into the something of the universe out of nothingness, right? 0 leads to 1, which leads to 1, which leads to 2, which leads to 3, which leads to 5, and et cetera, et cetera. So you often see the pine cone, and you'll see it in relationship to serpents or wings, but also sunshine. And why do we always draw this image of sunshine? Well, because we know that the pineal gland, and we're just about to get into what the pineal gland actually does, because it doesn't do what many of us, or even I myself, thought it did for a very long time, but it has functions that are equally, if not more important. And it gets calcified through fluoride in the water, different pesticides, and also decreased exposure to sunlight, right? In this regard, so this is talking about what affects the calcification of the pineal gland, or PGC means pineal gland calcification. What affects it? In this regard, increased age in male sex were shown to increase the risk of pineal gland calcification, whereas high altitudes and increased intensity of sunlight, not increased duration of sunlight, but increased intensity of sunlight exposure were calculated to decrease the risk for PGC. So high intensity of sunlight decreases the calcification of the pineal gland. And that was why in all these images, we look to be searching for intense rays of sunlight on the visual cortex or the pineal gland. All right, that finally concludes part 1. And now we're going to move on to part 2, the brain chemistry of the falcon. There's no way to get done in an hour, but we'll get done a good chunk of it in an hour. Okay, the brain chemistry of the falcon. The eye of Haru. We've all seen it. This is not new. I know you guys have seen this before, but here is the eye of Haru. Not Ra. The eye of Haru looks just like this region of the brain, doesn't it? All right, that's sort of where we get that comparison from. How did the Kemetic people know this, they say? Even Drake knows. OVO, October's very own, right? You're trying to tell me that these hieroglyphic symbols for more, here's the M, the bird, and the R, the sound mer. I know there are other delineations of the symbol, but look at that. This mer also means that right there, but the sound mer, MR. The bird, the owl, and this platform. You're telling me that, look at this. This symbol right here, the bird with the legs and the flat line that he uses, the bird and the legs and the flat line, is exactly the same symbol. So even Drake knows about the brain chemistry of the falcon. All right, so we're going to get into this now, guys. We've got here 2 competing theories, maybe not competing theories, but spectrum theories on different ends of the spectrum about how religions came to exist, how our spiritual awareness came to exist as human beings. The first theory, or this theory is proposed, is the theory of neurotheology, proposed by Dr. Andre Newberg. Mystical and spiritual experiences are triggered by exogenous, so outside the body, or endogenous, meaning inside the body, chemicals, and therefore that their ultimate source is the brain. So this guy is about the perspective that our experiences that we have written in the scripture, in the Bible, or sorry, I should say in the Torah, in the Nuevo Testamento, New Testament, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Book of the Dead, in all these scriptures we have, are triggered. The real experiences, they're triggered by chemicals that come from the brain itself or outside the body. Theoneurology, which is Dr. Rick Strassman's theories, which is what we're going to be looking at today, we are looking at with this, deals with entities from transcendent realms communicating via the brain. Okay, so these are the two different competing theories about how hominids, or we did in this form, come to establish these spiritual doctrines and experiences. Okay, one is triggered by chemicals, and one is entities from transcendent realms communicating with us. Both are true. They're both true. This, they don't read, but the thing is, they don't, again, the modern European, they have trouble bringing things together. Everything is divided to them, right? They don't see the unity of stuff. They see a mythological story. They think, oh, sorry, it's stupid. There's no such thing as animals with humans with animal heads. But they don't understand it's the unity, it's the overall picture that the story is trying to tell. Otherwise, they'd be teaching this in their schools, the mushroom stuff. But, or at least they'd be teaching this in the Egyptology, would be talking all about this, but they're not dealing with this, or not only this. This is low dose stuff. This is high dose stuff. First, we had this, and it kept us eating these things. And then we had this. And that's when we established the family of Ra. We met them. All right, so just think neurotheology and theoneurology, okay? Okay, this is an essay from a peer-reviewed journal. Now, this is a journal that looks at Fringe Science, all right? I'm gonna give you guys a definition of that. Oh, okay, let me just go back up here. Sorry, y'all, I'm not the best at PowerPoint. Okay, so I want to just talk about this for a second first. Okay, so I'm going to read you the essay because we have to read it. This is the part of the lecture that unfortunately I got to read the stuff that I'm writing here because I want, number one, this is our culture and we have to be able to speak eloquently about it. We have to be able to articulate it because the time is going to come when we're going to be challenged, obviously, as we always are being challenged, about our practices, our spiritual or quote unquote religious practices, right? And this is to be part of our temple and our activities. If it is to be part of that, we have to be able to explain it to people who are new, people who are coming from foreign religions like Christianity, who don't understand their culture yet, don't understand this relates to them, and other forces as well. We have to be able to understand this stuff. So I'm going to be going in today about this stuff because it's important for us to be able to articulate it and understand what is happening, understand how psilocybin, how the brain, how the mushroom relates to our biology. All right, I want us all to be on the same page so that we can appreciate the experience that we have them, and that way when you guys go into these states and you decide for yourselves to ingest this information physically by ingesting the mushroom, to ingest the home of your ancestors, you can do it without fear, knowing what is happening in your brain, okay? So this is an essay called The Neuropsychological and Evolutionary Implications of the Astonishing Psychoactive Effects of DMT. Fringe science, and let's build on this, is a branch of science that departs from the established scientific theories. It denotes unorthodox scientific theories and models. Sometimes fringe sciences are accepted and become mainstream. Evolution, the Big Bang Theory, the continental drift all began on the fringes of science, and today, while still debated by some, are taken as scientific truth. It can also be the other way around, right? Things are disproved and they become fringe. So I want you guys to know the context of this journal. With that being said, it is a peer-reviewed journal, and scientists, of course, are publishing in it. And so, although there are different branches of science, not all the hard stuff, right? But still, we're going to get into the hard stuff after. So we're going to talk about the softer stuff first because it gives context to the harder stuff coming up. However, suffice to say that the principal difference between the waking consensus world, which is the world that we live in today, you guys are at the temple, I'm here at home, that's the consensus world, okay? And the dream world, that is the world of dreams. The world you go to when you sleep, the world you go to when you die, the world you go to when you ingest the mushroom, okay? When you ingest DMT, all right? The dream world is DMT world, okay? In the dream world. Let's build it from that, okay? The principal difference between the waking consensus world and the dream world is the manner in which the former is modulated by extrinsic sensory data, so data that we get from the outside. Rick Strassman, that is the guy who deals with the entities from transcendent realms communicating via the brain, the high dose stuff, okay? Rick Strassman distinguishes between two alternate explanations of the DMT flash. Now, the DMT flash talks about DMT ingested through vaporizing DMT, smoking DMT. It's inhaled. It is different than the mushroom. It is a faster way to get to the experience of the mushroom. However, it doesn't last as long. And it doesn't go as deep because mushrooms, as you digest them, you're just gonna boo, boo, boo. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper because you keep digesting the stuff. You just keep falling deeper and deeper. DMT is very different, very, very powerful. Right away, you're transcendent to these places. You skip through all the hard stuff. You normally have the mushroom makes you go through hard stuff before you get there. We'll talk about that later, right? Anyway, but it doesn't last for long, about 20 minutes. The first is that the DMT experience is generated by the brain. The alternative is that DMT changes the receiving capabilities of the brain such that it can receive sensory data from a normally unseen reality. Struggling to explain the alien worlds visited under DMT, it might be time to consider what many scientists might consider unthinkable, that the DMT worlds built by the brain are modulated by extrinsic data from outside the brain, analogous to the manner in which the consensus world is modulated by sensory input from the outside world. In other words, the physical world we live in is not the real physical world. It's the world that we perceive from the input it gives us. Same thing for DMT. The experience in the worlds are modulated by the information that we get from outside of the brain. This would explain the striking parallels and similarities among users and is in line with the many individuals convinced of DMT's ability to transport the user to an alternate reality. However, this idea begs the question as to the form such an external modulation could take. How does the brain receive data from an alternate reality? Speculators have suggested that DMT somehow tunes the brain to receive channel DMT, and that's from a paper written by Hancock and Strassman. Check them out. Two different papers. The idea being that the brain is capable of receiving sensory input from different realities depending on precise neurochemically defined states, in the same way that a radio receives data from different radio stations depending on its tuning. This is an intuitively appealing idea. However, there is no suggestion as to how this tuning would occur to allow the brain access to this alternate data field. Ed Fresca speculates that DMT allows access to a non-local realm where the entities reside. Now, this was based basically on a survey, right? Put this paper into your Google search and check it out. The survey looked at the experiences that real people had when given DMT flashes, so inhaled DMT in a clinical setting. The shit that these people said that they saw and were convinced about the reality of is unreal. You guys got to check this paper out. Check out their response to this stuff. What they said, the people who had the experience said. Because you can't have a bunch of people who don't know each other, all apart, all different, say they went to the same places, saw the same stuff. Check it out. What was the conclusion of this essay? Okay, the essay concludes based on all the hard clinical data they have on DMT experiences and data that references neuroscience from other publications, other hard publications. The essay comes to the conclusion that the paradigm of modern materialist neuroscience fails to provide a straightforward explanation for DMT's remarkable effect on human consciousness. Our current understanding of the action of hallucinogens appears sufficient to explain many of the effects of classical psychedelics. But DMT seems exceptional and is more difficult to account for. This simple molecule has an extraordinary ability to rapidly fire the user into an unimaginably strange alien reality and then return them in a few minutes, shocked and shaken, but unharmed. The worlds DMT users find themselves in are completely unlike the dream world, which is the world we go to at night when we sleep and dream, and bear no apparent relationship to consensus reality, that is the world that we all agree that we live in, and yet possess commonalities that are difficult to explain unless they are modulated by an extrinsic sensory component of an unknown nature or are expressions of autonomous structures within the collective unconscious. The brain's thalamocortical system learned to construct consensus reality through evolution, development, and experience, that is, our everyday reality, and it seems likely that it must have also learned to construct alien worlds that appear when DMT floods the brain. This suggests that this simple tryptamine has a long-standing relationship with the brain, a conclusion supported by a number of pharmacological peculiarities unique to DMT. Of course, DMT itself contains none of the information that constitutes the experience. DMT itself, the chemical itself, contains none of the information that constitutes the experience. It has no alien landscapes, no entities, no hidden worlds. However, DMT may allow the expression of intrinsic thalamocortical activation patterns that develop in a world that is not so much alien, but from which we have become alienated. What are your unalienable rights? Right? What are your unalienable rights? Allowing us a brief but astonishing glimpse at a long-forgotten hyperdimensional heritage. Thanks to the curiosity of a small but growing number of individuals, this heritage, this long-forgotten hyperdimensional heritage, this is a peer-reviewed research paper, is now being rediscovered and explored. Surely, this can only be a good thing. DMT may be one of the most powerful tools for understanding consciousness and the nature of reality bestowed on the human species, and ought to be treated as such. As Terence McKenna was so keen to point out, DMT is not a secret. It is the secret. Perhaps he was right. All right, let's go to the hard stuff. You guys have been waiting for this for a long time, and I've been waiting to talk about it. Because the hard science is even more spectacular than all the fringe stuff. You got to think to yourself, why are these chemicals being produced? All right, so let's talk about this breakthrough research paper, the biosynthesis and extracellular concentrations of DMT in the mammalian brain. So basically, and I'm gonna let you guys read over this later. They have found the constituents. So we talked about tryptamine. Okay, let's go back. We talked about the production of DMT and what it takes, right? The cascade. Tryptophan, an amino acid, becomes serotonin. And then as it gets dark, becomes melatonin. That's one pathway it takes. It also takes the pathway of becoming tryptamine and then DMT. All right? So tryptophan can either become, either tryptophan becomes serotonin or it becomes tryptamine. If it becomes serotonin, it continues on to become melatonin. If it becomes a tryptamine, it continues on to become DMT. Okay? Now the enzymes Enzymes are proteins that are catalysts. They catalyze chemical reactions. All right, this is like a big. Let's go back to grade 9 science for a second. An enzyme is a protein in the body which expedites a reaction. It expedites the catalyzation or the causing of an action, a chemical change, right? That's what an enzyme is. It's a protein, okay? We found the enzymes which lead to tryptophans becoming DMT in the brain before. But this is the first paper that found the actual DMT molecule, not in the tryptophan or tryptamine state, the actual DMT molecule in the extracellular fluid that surrounds the brain. All right, DMT is an endogenous monoamine whose physiological functions remain unknown. Some say, and this is me adding, this is why I put it in italics, because some scientists do say that maybe it's designed to catalyze dying cells into a last fight for survival. Okay? Anyway, furthermore, since exogenous DMT, that is DMT taken from outside the body, combined with nanomolar affinities to various receptors, including 5-HT. 5-HT is an enzyme that it becomes serotonin, right? When 5-HT encounters an enzyme we're going to explain later called AADC, it becomes serotonin. That's the chemical reaction that enzyme produces, okay? The enzyme is, I think it's AADC. We'll get to it in a second though. Right? So since exogenous DMT combined with nanomolar affinities to various receptors, so we produce 5-HT, serotonin, we produce that stuff. This is all cells that are in our own brain. Okay, so DMT binds to these receptors, all right? And also trace amine associated receptors. Endogenous DMT, it's not exogenous DMT. When you take them outside the body, it binds to these receptors. It's true. But when we produce it ourselves, it might influence our brain functions according to the same receptors. This study represents the first quantification of dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, in the extracellular fluid of the brain in freely moving and normal behaving animals. They looked at humans and looked at rats, okay? Just so you guys know, rats are often substituted for humans in trials that might be unethical because you can kill rats without going to jail, number one. And also they have similarities to us in terms of their some of their functions, right? I know that sounds weird, but it is what it is. So we found that DMT concentration in the brain, are independent of the pineal gland. You guys hear that? The pineal gland has nothing to do with the production of DMTs. All that third eye stuff, all that third eye chakra stuff, I'm not saying I'm one of those people that, oh, my eye chakra, no. You know, I hate the corniness of that chakra talk, but I understand the concepts. But the pineal gland has a different function. We produce DMT in the brain. The pineal gland, whether it was intact or whether it was not intact, did not change the DMT quantity in the brain. I just want that to be clear, right? The pineal gland, I'm not saying it does not produce DMT. We don't need it for DMT. Not important. We have DMT already. It's already part of our physiology. At this point, it is uncertain to what extent, if any, the pineal gland contributes to DMT production. It is also unclear whether DMT detected in the brain is secreted from neurons or glial cells. That doesn't really matter. The point is, guys, we now know DMT is in the brain. We just don't know what that has to do with the pineal gland or why it's in the brain. Well, our ancestors know, but they say they don't know. All right, so let's look at this. This is all from me, guys. Again, I know that it's a lot of information, okay? But I want you guys to understand this because it's important. It's your Moorish biology. All biology is Moorish biology. You know what I'm saying? But this stuff relates to us particularly because of our relationship with melanin, aka melatonin, and the introduction of the psilocybin dynamic, because we're the ones who encountered the structures that then allowed us to build out the world we have today. Okay, it is a part of it's our symbiote with our Moorish culture. All right, so I want you guys to understand this stuff, and because it's really important for us to get a grip on this, because our children need to know in the future, right, about how this relates to their biology, so they can buy into, be part of this culture willingly, and not be thrown into it like we were thrown into Christianity and all these other religions, right? Didn't really explain shit. Tryptophan, the amino acid. Now, tryptophan can go through two ways. Like I said, it can either go through this pathway on the left, or it can go through this pathway on the right. In the pineal gland, tryptophan can go through this pathway on the left or this on the right. 9 times out of 10, it goes this way, to the left. There are reasons for that, and we'll talk about the role that the calcification of the pineal gland probably plays with that, because of what the pineal gland actually does do. But here it is, first breakdown. Tryptophan loves this. Okay, this enzyme has a very, very powerful, these guys are crazy about each other. Tryptophan loves this enzyme. So if it has the choice, right, it's floating around, if it has the choice to be drawn to this enzyme or this one, it's going to go to this one most of the time. Okay? Even worse than that, tryptophan, this encounters this enzyme, it becomes this molecule, right? 5-hydroxytryptophan. So tryptophan with some hydrogen bonds and hydrogen molecules, right? Okay. It then encounters this entity here and becomes serotonin. And that's how serotonin is produced. So let's roll that again. Tryptophan loves this way more than it loves this, which produces this. But then this molecule loves this molecule even more than this molecule loves this molecule. So when this molecule goes this way and becomes this molecule, it falls in love super hard with this one. So now you got two things working against you. You got two things working against DMT, this right way pathway, because going left is doubly desirable. Tryptophan loves the tryptophan enzyme, and this molecule produced by that enzyme loves this enzyme so much more even than this one loves this. So more than likely, tryptophan will always go this way. So we don't get this. We'll talk about that say it later, actually, because you might still get this from this, but we'll talk about that. But just the basics, tryptophan goes this way most of the time, but it could go this way. In order to go this way, this tryptophan has to want to love this, has to be attracted, has to be pushed towards this, and then it will become a tryptamine. And then it will become a methyltryptamine when it encounters this INMT, this enzyme. And then it becomes this, okay? So it encounters this, tryptophan encounters this, it encounters this, and becomes this. That's how it goes. So when the pineal gland need to have these two things together, AADC and INMT, in order to produce DMT. Let's go on. Okay, so this paper looks at, it says, well, we can't understand. We don't understand. Why won't the pineal gland produce DMT? If the pineal gland contains this, AADC, and INMT, because it does. The pineal gland contains everything it needs to contain to become this, but it doesn't seem to produce this. The brain produces this. And it's like, well, what's the pineal gland good for then if it doesn't produce this? I don't understand. I'm trying to figure this out. The extensive colocalization of INMT and AADC, which is aromatic amino acid decarboxylase. So the extensive localization of these in the pineal gland cells, so pinealocytes, all right, pineal gland cells, and the apparent lack of the pineal gland's contribution to the brain production of DMT present a paradox. We reason that there may be two competing pathways for tryptophan in the pineal: conversion to serotonin or conversion to DMT. We just talked about that a second ago. I'm just repeating it. All right. It is plausible, meaning it is possible, it is likely that in the pineal gland, this pathway, the left pathway, is overwhelmingly dominant. All right, resulting in lots of serotonin, lots of this stuff, but none of this stuff. And this right here talks about the affinities that I mentioned. Right, it just talks about the fact that even though the pineal gland contains both this and should produce this, it doesn't. Because tryptophan goes this way. It ignores this stuff. Okay. But we cannot rule out that the possibility that there may be compensatory increases in the DMT's in production in other brain areas if you lose the pineal gland. So guys, the good news is if you're even if it's calcified as hell, it doesn't matter. The body still produces DMT, and it still will recognize DMT when it sees it because it looks so much like serotonin. It will accept DMT in the same receptors, in the same cell receptors that it accepts serotonin. You guys get what I'm saying? So people might think, well, I hear that the pineal gland is calcified. So if that's the case, then how is it that we can produce DMT? We can produce it because you don't need the pineal gland for that. Don't need it for that. So now I want us to look at the molecules, all right? We're going to talk deep about this stuff. So if the pineal gland doesn't produce DMT, what the hell does it do? The pineal gland is something even better, guys. Even better than DMT. The pineal gland produces compounds which are known as the beta-carbolines, okay? Harmol, harmine, and pinealine. What do beta-carbolines do? Beta-carbolines inhibit. Remember we talked about when you ingest DMT orally, the monoamine oxidase breaks down the DMT. So that way it doesn't get a chance to cross the blood-brain barrier. All right? Okay? And that's why we love psilocybin, because when you ingest the mushroom has its own way of stopping monoamine oxidase. That's why the mushroom is special. Because usually, in the examples that Master Kalindi gave you in the video that Cujo played before, in the example of ayahuasca, for example, or even the Akashic records of Noble Drew Ali, if you want to get the experience, you must brew DMT with something that will inhibit this stuff, the monoamine oxidase in the body. All right? That's how we can ingest DMT. Only if there's something to stop monoamine oxidase from destroying it and destroying the process of tryptophan becoming it. The pineal gland does that. The pineal gland produces the compounds. The pineal gland produces the beta-carbolines, which stop the monoamine oxidase from destroying DMT so that way we can get the experience when we eat it. Now, harmaline, which again is harmal in the Arabic tradition, we talked about this already, right? In the previous slides on Islam and entheogenic use in Islam, harmal, and the hadiths around harmal, why harmal is treated with so much reverence in the hadiths. Harmal, is one of these compounds. Harmaline is a beta-carboline, along with harmine and pinealine. All three are produced by the pineal gland, and they are basically the enzymes which inhibit, or the compounds which inhibit the enzymes from producing DMT. It inhibits the combination of the INMT and ADT and all that sort of stuff that happens when we ingest DMT orally. It says, oh, nope, destroys that stuff. The harmaline, the beta-carbolines stop that from happening. All right? So that way the DMT can continue. This is a great lecture. Look at it and Google it yourselves. Either this is a talk about it's more talk about the production of these chemicals in the brain. All right. Okay. So going over things. Oh, let me actually go back for y'all and talk about this. So here is the tryptamine. Okay. This is what the molecule looks like. Tryptophan, when it decides to love this guy more than this guy, tryptophan becomes, look at this shape. It's the same shape. See the two hexagons and the line? Two hexagons in the line. Two hexagons in the line, right? Two hexagons in the line, okay? Tryptophan, when it encounters this, becomes this. The reason this is so accepted by our bodies and is so easy for us to accept, because look at this, the tryptamine is this. Serotonin, as you can see, and tryptamine are exactly the same. That is why DMT, because we're talking about DMT in a second, that's why DMT is so well received by our body, because it looks the same. The structure is exactly the same. It is. So it's like, oh, the body sees, it says, oh, is that serotonin? Okay, let me come and attach itself to me. Because DMT and tryptamines look so similar. You can't tell them apart, right? So that's the shape. Serotonin, now, if you remain to the left of this side, right, tryptophan becomes a tryptamine on this side. But tryptamine is the same thing. Even going here, it all looks the same to the body. So going this way, serotonin becomes this eventually, melatonin. It goes through all this left pathway. All right, and this is it. Same thing, hexagon, and the line is just a bit longer. It's got more stuff added to it. It polymerizes, right? The tryptamine polymer, it grows larger. The polymer gets bigger. This is talking about stuff I mentioned before of how tryptophan loves to become serotonin. It doesn't like to become DMT. So after melatonin, and we're talking about this a bit later, but it's possible that even if tryptophan goes down the left side and becomes melatonin, it's possible that melatonin eventually becomes DMT as well. And we're going to talk about that later in a second. That's why I put the pictures here, to show you how similar the chemicals are structured. They are all structured the same way. Two hexagons, a line for nitrogen, and then stuff is added or reduced from it. It's all the same chemical, right, in our brain. That's why we receive it so well. And this may be why, things that calcify the pineal gland are so prevalent, because they know that with a pineal gland that's uncalcified, it's going to produce the substances which allow DMT to accumulate in the body and cross the blood-brain barrier. Now, I want to talk a little bit about pineal gland calcification and what it is, so we understand. Because people are talking about calcified gland, the pineal gland is calcified, it's calcified, it's calcified. Let's talk about that for a minute so we understand what that means. Pineal calcification is calcium deposit in the pineal gland, which is a lot more important in humans. The occurrence of pineal calcification depends on environmental factors such as sunlight exposure. We talked about that, right? More sunlight, less calcification, and results in the decrease of melatonin production. Pineal gland calcification occurs when calcareous deposits form within the connective tissue of the pineal gland stroma, and it is similar to calcification observed in the habenular commissure and choroid plexus. Unlike kidney stones, the main component of pineal calcification is hydroxyapatite, and the calcium phosphate molar ratio in pineal calcification is similar to that found in the enamel and dentin of teeth. Right, so it accumulates calcium the same way other bones and teeth do. All right. Change morphological, so shape changes associated with pineal calcification include changes in the production of melatonin due to the decreased melatonin production in humans. So when your pineal gland becomes calcified, you lose the ability to produce melatonin. Your sleep patterns are thus altered, right? And a few studies reported that calcification of pineal cysts triggers severe sleep disorders by disturbing melatonin secretion in the pineal gland. In clinical studies, patients with primary insomnia showed reduced plasma melatonin levels during the daytime. Considering some studies, pineal calcification contributes to the reduction of melatonin production in humans that is directly associated with the development of neurodegenerative diseases such as AD. There's lots of stuff looking at, well, what would happen if we lived a little bit longer and our brains had a chance to develop? How would they change? Well, one reason we may not be finding out is because of reduced melatonin production that leads to brain degradation because of calcified pineal gland. But just take a look at the structure of the chemicals, the molecules. You can see how close they are. Melatonin is basically the same. It's got the same tryptamine base as 5-MeO or frog DMT. And I want to include all three of these here. I wonder if I wrote something more. I didn't. I want to include all the other stuff here to talk a little bit more about psilocybin. So here is 5-MeO DMT, right? Tryptamine structure, DMT, tryptamine structure. It's all the same shit, right? Hexagons, line, branches out. Hexagon, lines, branches out. Now, here is the mushroom. Okay? So we're going to talk about why the mushroom works to stop the monoamine oxidase from destroying DMT when we eat it. Okay, why is that? How does the mushroom stop it? Why is the mushroom unique in nature? How come the mushroom can be eaten without a brew? How come you can eat it without something that stops DMT from breaking down? Why is the mushroom different? Here is the reason why the mushroom is different, and it's friggin' amazing. It's as if it was engineered with the knowledge that, okay, here's how we can give DMT to a hominid and have it be accepted by that hominid's brain. That's how amazing this is, okay? Check this out. So psilocybin, the main active ingredient, hallucinogenic, quote unquote, ingredient in the mushroom, look at it. Here's a phosphate group, right? These are all phosphates on the molecule. It's the same molecule as DMT, right? Look, the hexagon, the lines, and the branching. It's the exact same DMT molecule. It's this plus this. That's the mushroom. When you ingest the psilocybin mushroom, an enzyme, I think it's called alpha kinetic phosphatase. Alpha kinetic phosphatase. The enzyme that when you ingest this molecule, the phosphatase enzyme rips this part of the molecule off and replaces it with a hydroxyl group. So basically, it replaces it with a water molecule. Now, why would the body do that? Well, there are a couple of reasons why it might do that. Let's go over here for a second. Actually, I think that it's better if you look at it in this order, or maybe not. I think this order is probably okay. Why does that happen? We'll talk about that in a second. But when you ingest psilocybin, the body has an enzyme which rips off this phosphate group, tears it off, and replaces it with a different molecule, a water molecule, and this becomes basically psilocin. Psilocybin becomes psilocin. So DMT is psilocin with a small hydroxyl group, a hydrogen-oxygen group on top. That's what psilocin is. So we saw the shapes. Watch this. Right? You ingest the psilocybin mushroom, and this, which was once a phosphate group, right? The big cross here, right? The plus sign, it's ripped off and is replaced with this, a hydroxyl group. So a group of hydrogen and oxygen atoms that are attached to one another. Okay. Now, you still have this group here, but this is gone. Now you have a hydroxyl group and you have a nitrogen group. Right? You have the DMT with the little group, hydroxyl group on top. Okay. Check this out. The group that the phosphorus is replaced with, it has a very slight positive charge on the hydrogen atom. Remember the different types of charge we learned about in science, right? There's covalent bonds, there's ionic bonds, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So, and the bonds have different relationships. This bond provides the hydrogen atom specifically with a small positive charge. This bond right here, has a slightly negative charge, just a little bit. Now, it's not enough to form a completely, ionic type bond or covalent type bond, but it's enough of an attraction, the slight positive with the slight negative, to form a hydrogen bond. Now, a hydrogen bond occurs when a hydrogen bound to a highly electronegative atom, usually nitrogen, oxygen, right? Look at this, the end's right here. We're dealing with the end, right? Dealing with the end. Little HO here and the end. Okay? When the hydrogen bound to a highly electronegative atom becomes attracted to the partially charged atom of another polar molecule. So this atom right here, it becomes a little bit attracted to this guy right here, the hydrogen bond. Though the bond is weak, it fulfills critical functions throughout nature. The ability of water molecules to form hydrogen bonds with itself is responsible for the cohesion of water. Hydrogen bonds are partially responsible for the expression of the secondary and tertiary structures of proteins, and is the force that holds DNA together in its famous double helical structure, right? So the hydrogen bond is the basic foundation of the DNA structure. This is why we say, one of the reasons we say the psilocybin is symbiote with our DNA. Look at this. It forms a similar bond with the slightly negatively charged nitrogen molecule and comes together. It's not very strong, but it's strong enough to come together. When it comes together, it forms a closed loop, just like this closed loop, in this closed loop. There's no open ends. This last end doesn't move freely. In other words, it can't, here it moves freely, right? It's just out in space. And it can easily be pulled in different directions by other molecules looking for electrons. That's how atoms work, right? They bind to each other based on they share electrons or they transfer electrons between each other, right? That's an ionic bond would be they basically transfer an electron from one another. A covalent bond means they share one, right? They have different types of bonds, right? But anyway, the point is, it forms a closed loop. And because of this closed loop, the monoamine oxidase, the stuff that breaks up DMT, the stuff that degrades DMT, the monoamine oxidase, because of this loop, it can't get through. The monoamine oxidase can't access the electrons in the tryptamine group. Because this loop closes, the monoamine oxidase coming from outside to take away the electrons, to degrade this atom, it can't get in because the loop is closed. And so the DMT is not degraded. It is allowed to pass through the blood-brain barrier. That is how the psilocybin mushroom works, because it knows that when you ingest it, you will take it in and you will replace the phosphate group, because phosphates are important. Phosphates produce energy. They produce ATP. Of course, they're very important for energy. And the removal of phosphate groups oftentimes activates enzymes. So we have these, alkaline phosphatase, that's the enzyme, alkaline phosphatase enzyme. When you ingest the psilocybin, it strips this of all the phosphorus and replaces it, exchanges it basically with a hydrogen molecule, so we can take the phosphate to other cells and do things with it, because we want phosphate, it produces our energy. The mushroom knew, whoever engineered it, know that our body will take in this entity, destroy the phosphate or use the phosphate to produce energy, because we want, it's good for us, right? We take it, we replace it, and the replacing of the phosphate was going to close the gap between within the chemical structure and not allow the monoamine oxidase to come in and take electrons out of the tryptamine. In other words, psilocin was perfectly engineered for our biology. Psilocybin was perfectly engineered for our biology. It was engineered to be ingested, to block the monoamine oxidase and allow it to come into the brain. Right? Psilocybin is rapidly dephosphorylated, removed into the active compound psilocin, which activates the serotonin receptors in the central nervous system, because it's the same structure. The body doesn't know the difference. It says, oh, okay, the phosphate, right? The phosphate group is gone, right? That phosphate group is gone, and now it just looks like serotonin. So it thinks, oh, it's serotonin. Okay, come on in. Come on into the brain, into the brain cells. Boom. Psych. It's not serotonin. It's me. I'm back and better than ever. And that is basically what happens, right? That loop blocks the monoamine oxidase. It acts as an MOA inhibitor by protecting the amine, the tryptamine, from deamination. Because that's how monoamine oxidase works. It deaminates the tryptamines. It takes the tryptamines away to degrade it, so it's no longer DMT. All right, so that is how the basic chemical stuff in the brain works between psilocybin, psilocin, our brain cells, and the pineal gland's beta carbones that it produces. Here is another version. Now, I looked high and low, guys, for this exact. I looked high and low for this exact book. I don't know where this came from. Cujo's got a great book on melanin production. Maybe you've seen this before, Cujo. I don't know. I've looked high and low for this. I can't find it. I don't know what book it comes from, but it does show, and I've read in certain articles that if left to accumulate for a long enough time, melatonin eventually becomes DMT when it encounters this enzyme. Now, the process of encountering this enzyme, I don't know, because like I showed you before, on the other example, tryptophan goes to the left, it stops here. But there's obviously some science saying that it can keep going if it continues to accumulate. But we wouldn't know because we don't spend time letting melatonin accumulate, because we don't live in pyramid bins anymore with dark rooms. But if you go to certain parts of the world, in Thailand, for example, they have underground rooms that travelers go to for the purpose of staying in darkness. Because as we know, this series happens particularly in darkness. But when it happens in darkness, melatonin continues to accumulate and accumulate. And if you stay in darkness for long enough, we talked about yesterday, you'll see people's heat signatures, because you'll be able to see your brain will pick up or register colors that are not on the typical infrared and ultraviolet scale. It becomes this if you spend time in darkness for long enough, right? 14, 21 days in complete darkness, no light, ideally eating melanin-building foods like squash and banana and that sort of stuff. Plantains and banana, right? So in that situation, when you remain in darkness for long periods of time, that's when the pineal gland kicks in because of what it does, which is producing the beta carbolines to stop the MAO from destroying this process, right? To stop this process from happening. This stuff is produced to make sure that this continues, and that's perhaps the other compounds floating around don't get in the way. Okay, so this was taken from a Master Finney picture. I have no idea where he got it from. I'd love to ask him. Of course, I can't right now because I haven't gotten to Land of the Dead yet. I've gotten some places, but not Land of the Dead yet. Maybe I could ask his wife and find out where he got the book from. But that's basically how this works. Okay, so now that we understand the chemistry of it, let's talk more about it so that we know that it's safe. It's a safe chemistry. All right, in 1958, Hoffman identifies psilocybin and psilocin from the mushroom as the active ingredients. Okay, and they travel to Mexico and all this stuff, and they do their shrooms there. Blah 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 blah. It's not important. I'm just giving you the history of sort of the rediscovery of psilocybin, right? And its hyperdimensional importance. I know it's hard to read, but moving forward, experiments are done. And what did we learn? Escalating doses of psilocybin. Very low dose, 0.45 milligrams per kilogram of body weight versus low dose, right? 0.115 milligrams per kilogram of body weight versus medium dose versus high dose. Different doses are different things that happen. The measures from these studies taking place in 1997, altered states of consciousness and physiological measures. So the dose, looking at the dose dependent scores. What happens when people take these different doses? Okay, physically, neither EKG or body temperature is affected at any dose. There's no EKG changes or body temperature changes at any dose of psilocybin. Blood pressure is moderately elevated during psilocybin at 60 minutes of high dose. A little bit of blood pressure elevation, right? Maybe like having a coffee or something. Endocrine measures. So these are the endocrine measures. Those are the glands that produce hormones, right? TSH, look these terms up. TSH, ACTH, and cortisol levels elevated at peak effects of high dose, whereas prolactin increased during medium and high doses. These are just some doses that they look at when ingesting psilocybin is looked at. Conclusion: confirmation of already known favorable safety profile of psilocybin. Can't hurt yourself with psilocybin. All right. Mice survived now look at this. Okay. High doses is 0.315 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That's a high dose. 0.3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is a high dose. Look at these doses they fed the mice doses that were so high. Okay. High doses less than 1. High dose is 1/3 of 1 milligram. They fed the mice 200 milligrams. That means they fed the mice 600 times the amount of psilocybin that they measured in this study. And still, nothing happened. Very low LD50. What does that mean? It means how much of a substance can you feed 100 rats before it kills 50 of them? Right? How much of this stuff can you feed to 100 rats before it kills 50? So the ratio of 6:41, lower than aspirin and nicotine. Don't we take these every day? It's less harmful than a cup of coffee. You would have to eat your own body weight in one sitting to ingest a toxic dose of psilocybin mushrooms. Now, if you were to eat anything at your own, 200 pounds of meat, okay, 200 pounds of broccoli, 200 pounds of whatever, you're dead. You're dead. So it's you can't hurt yourself with psilocybin. It's completely physically safe. Physically safe. Okay, so this is another paper which looks at DMT ingestion and why it's released and why it happens. Well, when they put mice under rats into cardiac arrest, DMT was much higher. Floods the brain, floods the cells. So let's look at that. These data suggest that DMT may be actively synthesized and released in mammalian tissues and stored in or transported to the mammalian brain. Exogenous administration, that is intravenous, so inhalation, administration, or orally in combination with the monoamine oxidase. And again, that just means to measure DMT's effects, you have to ingest it with either a vaporizer or orally with something that will stop the breakdown of DMT. Once again, psilocybin mushroom doesn't need that because the mushroom stops the breakdown of DMT all by itself with a closed loop, with an actively closed loop chemical structure. The loop doesn't become closed. It becomes closed when we ingest it and destroy the phosphate group for other areas of the body. And then the molecule says, okay, let's close up, and stops the MAO. Elicits profound alterations in consciousness characterized by visual and other perceptual effects, extreme emotional responses such as euphoria or paranoid ideation, and internally generated and interactive visual landscapes, accompanied by a sense that the reality of what is being perceived is more vivid than dreams or waking reality. This, coupled to DMT's close structural similarity to melatonin and serotonin, as we've talked about, has led to several hypotheses of elevated levels of endogenous within the body DMT being involved in naturally occurring altered states of consciousness, such as dreaming, religious experience, the near-death state at the cardiac arrest, psychosis, and creativity. Internally generated and interactive visual landscapes. So basically, let me see if I talk about this later. Basically, ingesting this stuff allows you access to interactive places, and there's no physical consequence, but it can elicit extreme emotional responses. And that is the reason why when we talk about using this stuff, we want to do it in the way that we did it in our infancy, in a graded manner. You start with low doses and you just build up with practice. Every single time you try a bit of a higher dose. And sometimes the experience may be too intense that you might want to repeat a lower dose. But after a while, when we get to the higher doses, I myself have it. The doses in the 25 to 30 gram range are what allow you to break through to break through the this sort of subatomic, or the visions of the subatomic realms of activity, and enter the realms yourself. It's a dose specific response. It's interactive the whole way through, but it takes practice to be able to, sort of stop yourself on your way through the hyperdimensional realms it's giving you access to visually, and sort of will yourself to stop and move into directions that will allow you to encounter the realms interactively yourself. It does take practice, but the landscapes are there, and you can see them yourself when you go, and you will see them yourself when you go. Did I want to talk about this? No, this is just more proof that DMT is what we produce ourselves, but that you can't ingest it unless you have some sort of inhibitor to stop the monoamine oxidase, which again is what the mushroom is all by itself without the need for adding it into a brew. Okay, so people want to know, of course, what is, okay, so all this stuff, what's it really about? What really happens when you eat this, when you take this stuff? What is so important about this experience? Okay, I accept that it's everywhere. I accept that we used to do it, but why? What's so great about it? I want to play this clip. And this is a clip from the Animatrix, which is it's a series of cartoons that were basically made to add to the story of the Matrix, or everyone's favorite story, right? They made these cartoons to expand the universe, to sort of show what was going on in other places while Neo was out doing his thing, other parts of the world that he didn't get to yet. So I want to play this video because this video is interesting, and it sort of, being the Matrix is all psychedelic. The video basically encapsulates, okay, well, how intense is the experience when you're on it, and what does it mean when Terence McKenna talks about you have to decide for yourself whether to take the plunge and take the leap. Because I tell you, they are psychologically challenging experiences. So what happens when you take it and when you're able to finally, after a high dose, remain calm enough to weather the storm? What do you break into? What do you break through? And here is an example. He said, Neo, I believe. I know it wasn't a dream. What wasn't a dream? He knows that what happened and his experiences with the mushroom wasn't fake, it was real. He knows it was real. That's sort of just an example of what the experience is like a little bit the first time. Because when you take too much psilocybin, there's no way out. And as Master Clinton says, if you've never taken too much, you've never taken enough. There's no way out. And you got to make these decisions, basically. And it's like, okay, well, I've shown you what's up. The mushrooms, I've shown you what's up. Do you want to take that plunge now? Because the whole point is his experience, understanding that he was in a matrix and it wasn't the real world. And the real world could only be accessed by his death, by him dying, is what this is all about. It's the mushroom is to show you that there is something more, that the real world is after. The real stuff takes place after you pass. And he trusted in that truth, jumped off, and stayed within the knowledge of the mushroom in the realms that come after, because he knew he didn't have to fear death. And that's basically what the psilocybin mushroom is on your early journeys, what it does for you. All right. So yeah, we're coming to an end now. I know that. I was talking to Cujo, saying that this portion could be run through. Well, okay. I'm gonna run through this stuff quickly, and then I can do it quickly, and then we can come back to it in the question and answer period, or we can come back to it another day. But this is the final stroke of the pen. It's the Moorish Israelite connection. And I say this for last because in order for us to appreciate this section, we have to understand the chemistry. Because without the chemistry, the instructions that Yahweh gives to Moses about how to design the tabernacle and what to put in the tabernacle are not really will not strike you. But now that you know the chemistry of entheogens and how they work in the brain, when I'm going to look at a research paper now that analyzes the constituents of the tabernacle, the cinnamon, the myrrh, all of the constituents that are in the Ark of the Covenant that God commands Moses to construct the tabernacle with are actually an exact entheogenic concoction that the people of Kemet exported to other places. It's the exact concoction of chemicals and substances that Egypt produced. It's like a recipe. It's the exact recipe. This is a recipe that came from Egypt. My point is that Yahweh did not give Moses instructions. He gave him a recipe. He gave him a recipe, which you'll see in this research paper is the exact same recipe that we used to provide the entheogenic experience to people. All right. So, there's a lot of anti-Egypt message in the latter half of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. Of course, in the first half, I'm skimming through this real quick. In the first half, the people of Egypt, the Cometians, the Moors, quote unquote, right, are very, very close to Israel. They're almost inseparable. Okay, we have there's a lot of interbreeding. A lot of the bloodlines of the tribes of Israel come out of the merging of the Shemitic and the Hamite. So we all are one people. But what happens is that Egypt soon, during the course of the Pentateuch period, Egypt is invaded, as we know, by many foreign nationals, by many outsiders, by the Hyksos and whatnot. And that invasion into Egypt cripples the Egyptian spiritual system and corrupts the spiritual system. And that is why you see later on in the scripture a very negative sort of anti-Kemetic, anti-Egypt, right? Do not do as they do in Egypt. You read that in Leviticus, whatnot, because because Mizraim was a friend to Israel, and Mizraim became corrupt because the name changed when it got invaded, and all the systems, the political systems, the spiritual systems became corrupted. So of course, Yahweh is saying, don't do as they do in Egypt, because our practices, unfortunately, our practices gave way to corruption. And so God demanded that he leave. He took the best of what we had taught him prior to the fulfilling of the corruption and left with it. And from that, established the principles for the Hebrew people to live by. And those principles involved an entheogenic foundation in order to communicate with Yahweh. That is what this paper is basically about, okay? Now we can talk about this paper in the Q&A perhaps, and I can send it out. Or maybe we can finish this lecture another time, but I can kind of do a Q&A, and that lecture can be an addendum of sorts. But essentially, the research paper proves that these constituents, the myrrh, the verum, cannabis sativa called cannae balsam, right? Come together to the mimosa nilotica. All of these things are entities that God commands Moses to make an ointment of, and of cassia 500 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, and of oil olive anin. And thou shalt make it an oil of holy ointment. Anointment, remember, anoint with what? What do we learn about in the second of the Gospels? What is an anointment? What does it mean to anoint? What are they? And we learned that to anoint and anointment. And thou shalt make it an oil of holy ointment, an ointment compound after the art of the apothecary. This holy ointment was a specific Kemetic concoction that was exported by the Kemetic people from their apothecaries in the Middle Ages. This is from a book of the Age of Nita, written 1847 with these pages, okay? Check this out, because what it proves is that the Israelites, first of all, the Levi tribe, that's the priesthood tribe. Priesthoods are a Kemetic concept. To say that the Hebrews and the Kemetic Cometians were never friends, were always beefing, isn't true. The priesthood is a Kemetic concept that the people who later spoke Hebrew, right, which would have descended from the early language of Mudad, right? They took that concept of a priesthood and applied it to themselves. So they had one tribe of people who took the Entheogens and told everybody else what God said. And we had a priesthood too. Remember I said the Muslims became scholars. We said, okay, Bob and Billy, Cujo and Omar, you guys take the stuff and tell us what God said. The priesthood is a Kemetic system that the Israelites employed in order to continue to communicate with Yahweh, who said, do not do as they do in Egypt, because Egypt's system of spiritualism became corrupted, right? And so that's what that is looking at, all right? Check out that research paper. I got it. Let me see if I can I'll put up for you guys later during the Q&A. And lastly, I want to talk a bit about the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, and they don't eat of the tree of life. In fact, the serpent doesn't even mention it was there, even though in the beginning of Genesis, God says, well, I put both trees there. The tree of life is a tree that was only accessed by eating from the tree of good and evil. Okay? The tree of life, the Pa Neteru, this is an old concept. The tree of life is the emanations that they used in Kemet of the creation of the universe from nothingness. Okay? The sound system that they used to create the physical reality out of nothingness. That's what the tree of life is. And God banned Adam and Eve from the garden for ingesting the knowledge of good and evil, because the knowledge of good and evil leads to the knowledge of the tree of life. And God did not want that knowledge in the hands of humanity for whatever reason at that time. And one of the reasons that we know this is because Adam and Eve never communicate with God. God communicates with them. It's the will of God is expressed through the creation, and they receive it. But there's no communication between Adam and God, or even God. They don't talk until the two have actually ingested the fruit, which suggests that ingesting the fruit is what allowed them to communicate with Yahweh for the first time. All right, so we're going to stop there, and I hope that anything that was left out I can answer in the Q&A, and I'm getting started so long, but now we know how long the thing really takes to do, and we'll make sure that we get it right on the money in moving forward. But that is essentially what we are looking at when we're talking about the system of Islamism as it was in its origins. All right, Cujo, I'm good. Let's move on, man.
I guess you are good, because ain't nobody got questions out there. They shouldn't have any.
Ask questions, guys. Ask questions.
They should be two.
Because the thing is that this, and I know I've stressed this before, but if we want to evolve as Moors to the height of what we can and could be, this is involved in that process. And it's not me saying that from the sake of my own experiences. This is what our ancestors have left for us in stone. And there is a reason that they left it for us in stone. It was too important to be forgotten. And all of these secret societies have kept it as a part of their governance, a part of what they know and do in practice, so that they wouldn't forget. And they kept it as a part of their symbology, right? The Masonic symbols that we saw, right? The symbols in the church that we saw. All these symbols, the reason they keep them there is so that way they have a map back to the source. The Dalai Lama can say, okay, well, you know what? I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Everyone's worshiping me and praising me, and that's nice and that's fun and blah, 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 and that's cool. But I remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. Their symbols that they use are a shout out to our ancestors saying, we remember why we are doing what you taught us to do. And the only people, again, on earth who are shying away from this stuff are the NBCs, right? The NBCs are shying away. It's not a part of their culture. We live in a society that's mycophobic. We have a fear of fungi and mushrooms that was deliberately, in my opinion, placed within our structures, institutionalized, because it's fungi. It's weird. It removes us further from our spiritual systems that we used. And frankly, it removes us further from Islamism if we were to understand it in the way that I believe Noble Drew Ali wanted us to understand it, based on the fact that he came from there and he adorns the symbology too, which must mean that he meant for it to return to us, because it was the foundation of what he learned there.
Peacemore, you're getting the questions on the screen?
I'm not getting them, actually. Hold on a second.
You're not
Hold on a
seeing
second. Okay, private chat. I see the private chat. Is that where it's supposed to come in?
No, okay. Well, this question, does the tree of life have to do with the mushroom?
Yes. The tree of life is discovered inside the mushroom. The mushroom is what taught them about the emanations from the tree of life. It's what taught them about, well, how did the physical universe come into fruition from nothingness? That's what the tree of life deals with, and that is what that is essentially what was accessed by Adam and Eve when they ingested the fruit from the tree of good and evil, right? That's why God says, well, if they eat from this tree, now they know good and evil like we do. And if they keep that up, they might stretch their hand out and take fruit from the tree of life and also eat and be immortal like us. So that's essentially what's going on with that. Any other questions? I can see comments. I'm not sure if I'm missing the questions, but you guys can just spit them out and I'll be happy to answer them anyway.
Yeah, I just told him put the questions in all caps in the
Okay.
There's another one right there.
Are they at the wait a second, go to the private chat. Okay.
No, yeah, the comments part.
Okay, comments part. Okay. Who can was the shroom the bread and wine at Last Supper? Yes. So remember we spoke about earlier. I know it's a lot of information, guys, so I appreciate the questions, and that way I can be better next time. But the shroom, the bread in life, yes, because we dealt with the psychedelic gospels. And what did we learn from the Gnostic gospels, which predate the current New Testament gospels by quite some time, is that the bread and the wine is actually the excrement. It's the physical pieces peeled from the Amanita muscaria mushroom. It's a very fluffy structure. That's what the cap is. And the wine is when you boil you boil the mushroom and out comes this red watery substance which you pour and then you can drink. And we saw also the grail, the cup of the Last Supper, being the turned up cap of the Amanita. So yes, absolutely, the shroom is the bread and wine of the Last Supper. The shroom is the Holy Grail, but not the psilocybin shroom. That one deals with a different mushroom. We're talking about the Amanita muscaria, right? But they both are an entheogen of importance to our people. Yes.
You got that next one? Knowledge of the water canopy or biosphere?
No. What do you mean by that? That doesn't seem like a question. Do you have any? So you have any knowledge of a water canopy or biosphere? No, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Ask it again any way that you want. But new comments. But yeah, I'm not quite sure what that question means. Ask it again though. Or do you mean like what a biosphere is, or what a water canopy is? What do you mean more by that?
It was an amazing build though. Off the chain.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's some good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do the Israelite stuff another time, because I'm so sick of hearing the beef, between Moors and Israelites, when really it's the same culture.
Straight.
Yeah, any more questions, guys? Go ahead and ask if you want any stuff on the chemistry side of things. That's I know we went over a lot of stuff that you may have questions about. If you have any questions about producing the mushroom yourselves, we'll deal with that stuff in person, all right, at another time, and deal with the system for doing that, a foolproof system for doing that. I think it's important because buying the stuff isn't the same as growing it yourself. People can lace things and all sorts of stuff, right? Okay. I recently came across some pre-flood information, and they mentioned that the atmosphere was made of a water canopy. Okay, so we didn't go through the book of Genesis like I wanted to here. I would certainly like to, but what I'll basically say is that the atmosphere is made of a water canopy. Because even if you look at the National Geographic, there's a documentary called One Strange Rock. It talks about the series of phases that the Earth went through in its infancy. And there was water, and there was rock, and there was no light. Once the light hit, the water evaporated, right? Time began, water evaporates, and what does it create above? It's the biosphere is really dumbing down our godlike abilities. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. So if you look up, it's basically a place to hold water, right? Because our weather system on this planet is determined by water. And so if you look up, well, that is a place to hold water, just like we have water down below. The firmament is essentially a water canopy. This is going back, if I would say, way pre-flood, but yeah, that's what that deals with. It deals with the fact that yes, it is a water canopy because it's a firmament to hold water. That's what clouds are, right? That's what drives the planet's ecosystem, is having water above that's separated from the water below. Severely dumbing down our godlike abilities, yes. So basically, what we're talking about here is that so pollutants, as well as fluoride in the water and different things like that, have contributed to a less effective, more calcified pineal gland, because DMT is everywhere. It's in the canary grass, like Matthew's about to talk about. It's in the leaves, and it's anywhere. I mean, there's lots of strains of mushrooms, and you can make DMT. DMT is everywhere. But the thing is that our pineal glands don't produce the beta carbolines in the amount that they once did, because our pineal glands are not as functional. You know what I'm saying? The beta carbolines allow the DMT that's ingested to pass into the brain. So our ancestors surely lived in a state of living where they were producing more beta carbolines and therefore were receiving more DMT all the time. And of course today we're not receiving the same amount because pollutants in the atmosphere, as well as stored in the water and other things, have affected our pineal gland's function, right? Remember, the pineal gland doesn't produce the DMT in the brain. It produces the beta carbolines, which allow DMT to enter the brain from outside sources. Yeah, this guy said right here, 40 plus plants of DMT, exactly. Yeah, water is air, air is water, exactly. Yeah, so we used to have gills of the ribs. I know, because there's a crazy gills were removed, genetic formation of the see, that's a lot of stuff too, talking about our rise out of the water, because we know that the fungi were the first single cell organisms, and of course their reproducible things have gills, right? The penises have gills, right? So there's a lot of stuff that deals with that, and I'm sure you can get into different tangents. And if Clinton was still alive, I'm sure his lectures on that would blow you away, would blow us all away. But what he has to say, a guy removes Adam's ribs, yeah, I can just say that's what's he really removing? What's it really referring to, right? So yeah, lots of stuff to talk about. I mean, it goes into everything, every part of every mythology we ever heard of. Eventually, it comes out of the DMT. Mushrooms are sentient. Not that we think they're sentient. Nobody here. Mushrooms are sentient. That was one of the early things we first saw in the lecture with Paul Stamets speaking, giving the TED Talk about mycelium. Mycelium knows you are there. Mycelium knows you are present. It jumps up from the ground in your aftermath, trying to grab hold of debris and the information that you left behind. Mycelium is sentient. Mushrooms are sentient, yes. Yeah.
Peace, more. Give thanks, yo.
Good, thanks to y'all. And thank you guys for your time. I know it was really long. We'll compact it, we'll make it better, and we'll follow this up with hopefully some in-person class stuff, and maybe even a small addendum dealing with the whole tabernacle stuff. If y'all want to do that, you guys can let me know. But I'd ready to come on in and talk more about how we can integrate this actual practical aspect of Islamism into our temporal proceedings. So yeah, thank you guys, appreciate it. Reach out anytime.
There was one more right there. The Garden of
Okay.
Eden.
We're oh shoot, where's that? Does the Garden of Eden have anything to do with mushroom? Okay, so we addressed this briefly. Yes, because out of the Renaissance, and everybody knows the Renaissance is the Moorish Renaissance. It's what was discovered in Europe after we left Spain, right? We left all this great stuff in Spain. Mind you, Spain was not our first go. Our ancestors, the Twa people and the Cochin DNA had always been there. So we were always in Europe, but we went into Spain after a period of time, right? 800 AD. And I'll answer that question in a second. 800 AD, and we left stuff there, and we were kicked out in the 15th century, and Spain fell into dark ages, and the rest of Europe flourished because our knowledge was exported outside. And in all the Renaissance images of the Garden of Eden, the tree is always depicted as a mushroom. All the medieval Europe stuff, their Christian artwork. I have a book, Christian artwork, Christian mushroom, Christian art. All the stuff shows Eden to be a mushroom, the tree to be a mushroom, the fruit to be a mushroom. The Gnostic Gospels, what did Christ say? He said, in paradise, there are 5 trees which do not change no matter the season. Eating the fruit from these trees, you will never experience death. Because God says, if you eat from it, you'll die. The serpent says, no, you won't die. Who was right? And in what context? So yes, the Garden of Eden story is also, in my opinion, based on the literature, what we have knowing about entheogens, about the mushroom. And the tree of life is within that too. How do you know if a tree was kicked in? So I could tell a full story. I won't do it. I'll tell a half story. I'll tell a small into the story.
You can tell a 3/4.
I'll tell you know what? I won't get into it because I don't want to ruin it for you guys, okay? But I will tell you my own experience on my first trip. I called Master Kalindi and I almost reamed him out. I said, you didn't, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that this, you didn't say that this is what, this was what the experience was going to be. You know, I don't want to accuse him of anything, obviously, and he's an elder, but I just was like, I was very surprised. My first experience was very intense. I spent a lot of time crying. It's very intense. I don't want to get into what happens when the logos or this entity first encounters you. Except to say that you begin where you are and you begin to sink low. You begin to sink low, sort of as if you're sinking to within your body. You're sort of sinking lower and away from it as it starts. You know when it begins to start because your eyes dilate and physically things become difficult. For example, if Kuja were to call me, now I would answer the phone, he'd say, "You okay? You sound kind of slurred," because it gets kind of difficult to speak and move a little bit, and your body says, "Okay, you gotta lie down." You'll know because your body will say, "You gotta lie down." Okay, so the machine elves that are spoken about, these are individuals who have experienced the DMT flash. The DMT flash is the inhaled form of DMT. It is not psilocybin. It is the evaporated form of DMT. Synthetic form of DMT, or even if you were perhaps to go into the Sonoran. You didn't watch Naruto and you got the Toad Mountain, right? You know, and you have Gamakichi and Gamamora and all these different toads, and the Toad of Prophecy who Naruto meets, you know, and say I had a dream and you were in the dream and talks about that stuff. So the toads are interesting because toads have an entheogenic importance to our ancestors because they produce DMT from their glands. The Bufo alvarius toad, the Sonoran desert toad, secretes DMT in a liquid form from its gland. It's a 5-MeO DMT. It's not the we know we have psilocybin. It's the 4-phosphorylated DMT. This is a 5-MeO DMT that frog produces, and you can dry it into a powder. And you can smoke it. That's what they used to smoke prior to the Younger Dryas period, and they would have their DMT flashes. And the DMT flashes are much more intense and fast acting than psilocybin. Boom! You transport it right there. So not psilocybin. Psilocybin is different. Psilocybin is like, you have to earn it. I'm not just going to give it to you. Are you sure you want to know? Do you want to know this and that? It'll take you through a whole evolutionary leap. A sleeping universe, a a breathing universe, a waking universe, a living universe, a dying universe, a dead universe. It'll take you through. It'll say, "Are you sure you want to?" You have to deal with it. You have to speak with it. You have to practice controlling your movement in this space, and before you be able to have control to sort of enter into the different phases that or evolutions or history that it wants to show you. You got to have practice in this space. Psilocybin is different, and psilocybin is because you're digesting it. What happens is you're taking too much, a whole bunch at once, and it just goes like this. You start here, and before you know it, you fall here. You just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually you're like, "Get me out of here! I've taken too much. I've gone too far." And the deeper you go, eventually you break through to that quantum space where you do encounter those entities. So that would be between the 25 and 30 gram dose of psilocybin. I've only gotten to as high as 21. But let me tell you, it's worth the time building up to that experience. To know in a different way than the flash that there is something more, and that after you pass, you have options, places you can travel there. You may not get there right away, but there are paths and steps and worlds to see before you arrive at a certain place. Where DMT flashes, boom, you're right there. You can't decide where. Boom, you're right there. Psilocybin is more like, what do you want to do? You've been here long enough now. We know you a bit better. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And you can go there. Whereas this is more like, boom. Oh shoot, you're already in the world where all the elves are and stuff, and they're talking to you. Oh, thank God you're here. We waited so long to see you. Where have you been? We're so happy that you finally saw this technology. And everybody who doesn't even know each other all have the same experience. So that's how we know that it's not the same thing as a hallucination. In the literature I'm talking about. Yeah. Any more questions? See, because you start getting taken. Feels like you're being pulled into meditation by a deity. That's a pretty good approximation. Pretty good. Remember, it's dose specific. So a 15-gram dose does not feel like a 5-gram dose. It starts as one. And if you ever do a really high dose, like a 20-gram dose, if you ever peel back and say, okay, you know what? I don't want all that because I was gone for 10,000 eons and that was the hardest thing of my life. You go back down to 10, you think, oh, this is nice and easy. And it kind of is. But the mushroom's like, hey, I remember you, and we're going to continue from where we left off last time a little bit. So it's a bit of a different experience. But yes, I could say it feels like being pulled into meditation by a deity. That's a pretty decent approximation of how it might begin. By cords and bounds. Is this what the Holy Prophet meant when he said everyone is connected by cords and bounds? Man, my first trip, I felt like I was in a room full of all these different bodies of people I knew and loved, and I was banging on them like, wake up, wake up, wake up. That's what it felt like to me. I was trying to, people that are because feelings like love are very powerfully, what's the word I'd use? They're very powerfully magnified on this stuff. You feel like love can take you to people who are attached to you on these cords and bounds, but maybe they're still asleep. So in my opinion, a lot of things the Prophet said were actually about the mushroom. Of course, I only know that through his symbolism in terms of what he gave us visually and the things he sort of said here and there, as well as what I know now that he studied when he was in the temples in Kemet. So do I think so? Yeah. And I think the Prophet was waiting because he knew what was up. Yeah. He had his experiences in the temples and the dark rooms and stuff. Lick the toad. Yep, that's what it's like. Right, kissing the frog, right, and it becomes a princess. Yeah, because you get high and you look at it, and all of a sudden it's as big as you are, and talking to you, right? You might not make it back. You might not make it back, man. Yeah, my last big journey, I didn't know how I made it back. The things I had to do to get back made me take a break for a long time. And again, I don't want to speak too much because I don't want to impose on your experience or make you think, oh, I don't want to do it because it sounds intense. It's a beautiful thing that our ancestors were doing from the dawn of time, and it's what made us who we are. So hell yes, you should do it. I have some of your pill form. I don't want to take those as just, you know what? I haven't heard of everything being bad. I think you can take some in pill form. Start with a low dose. Your response will tell you what you need to know about it. You can chat me up about it afterward, but pill form is fine. Of course, I say it's always best to produce your own real stuff so you know for certain where it came from and that no one messed with it, right? It's just knowing for certain where it came from, right? Knowing for certain. And that's why I recommend that. But if you got pills, take them. Take them. When I was small, you took some. Yeah, close your eyes. You even seen Baron semi. I'm not sure what that word means. What does that mean? What am I missing? Should I know something that Cujo? What does that word mean? Yeah, I'm not sure what that means, but oh yeah. Everyone's physiology is different. Some people will encounter entities with a lower dose than a higher dose. Seems to me I'm one of the unfortunate ones. I'm a higher dose person. It takes me a bit more. And I wasn't as calm early on. I tried to ascend too quickly through the dosages, which is why I'm sort of coming back down. But yeah, you meet lots of guides, man. You meet lots of guides if you're open and calm enough to receive them. Because psilocybin's like, woo, you did too much. You got to be humble now and just lie there and take it. And if you can do that and calm your mind and demonstrate self-mastery, right? As the Islamism, right? I self-law and master. It's all about self-mastery. If you can demonstrate self-mastery, which is why you build up to higher doses, it's what happens. The experiences are endless. And of course, you're going to encounter many guys. Yeah. Keep someone around to keep you safe. Yeah. First 3 times, be supervised. 2 or 3 times, be supervised by somebody. I recommend. 20 grams is scary though. 20 grams is where it begins. It's really 40 and 50 grams. And I know 20 grams is scary. You're damn right. I can tell you doing 21. Yeah, it'll be a little while before I work myself back up there. And my next big dose, I'll share with you guys when I get there, should be the breakthrough dose. But I'm not there. I've dropped back down and working my way back up. Yeah, thoughts are magnetic. Yeah, it's all photons and stuff. Anything else cool that I'm missing?
No, I think you got everything.
Okay, and yeah, guys, don't worry because I can show you and again, it's a Schedule 1 or Schedule 3 drug depending where you are. Some places now, psilocybin is completely, there's no consequences. You know, it's you can buy it in stores and stuff. We look at this as a religious right, our indigenous religious right that's in the scripture. And no one can say shit to us because it's our jurisdiction, it's our nationality stuff, and it's our ancestor stuff, and we can back up that claim with the information in these slides, right? So again, when we do it, there will be no cost. I'm going to show you guys how to get it for free. You will never have to pay a dime ever again to anybody else to get it, or depend ever again on someone shipping you something, because you're going to know how to do it for yourself. So if people reach these realms through salvia herb, I would say no, because we're talking about tryptamines. Tryptamines have a particular role in the brain. Our brain, our nervous system is run on tryptamines. So it's different than some of the herbs you may be encountering, because we're talking about a specific molecule, the tryptamine molecule on which our brains are designed to run, have evolved to run on, right? Not to say you kind of great experiences, you still kind of know other things, but yeah. It's life-changing. I'm like, oh yeah, it's more than life-changing. It's more than life-changing, no doubt about it. It's our stuff, and you got to think to yourself, would you live the same if you knew where you were going after you passed? Probably not. And that's why they don't want people dealing with this stuff, because the path you choose for your life would probably not be capitalist, colonialist paradigm. Your life would be different. You would not be looking to achieve the things that people say are important. It wouldn't matter to you. You'd be living a very different life. And that's why they don't want us dealing with it.
Straight.
Yeah.
Give thanks, Morris, once again.
Islam.
Gonna give it up.
Islam.
Proper. So we'll set up.
I'll come in, man. I can come in
again for the part 3 and a little bit of the whole process.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And also I want to give honors to Master Teacher Kalindi. Honors
Rest
for
in peace, rest in power.
kicking it off. Yeah, honors to him for kicking it off.
Yeah.
Some of the Moors were talking about in the chat how a lot of these other master teachers, metaphysical master teachers, been in his realm and know what's up, and they're holding back on going there with it. You know, keep talking
Yeah.
about the book stuff and
Yeah.
not going within. So
Islam. Yeah. You know why I believe that, Cujo? And that's very true because, as we'll talk more about this, like Kalindi was a martial artist.
Yeah.
The thing is that martial arts came out of entheogens. We learned the formations and physical forms of combat in martial arts in terms of reading people's thoughts and energies with physical forms with our experience on entheogens. And high-level martial artists, when they have mastered their craft and they can no longer gain experience from fighting with masters of their equal, what do you think they do? They go crouching tiger, hidden dragon, right?
Yeah.
Where they're floating through the canopies, landing on sword tips, and that's the real martial arts stuff that they try to bring back, right? So 100%, these guys are holding back, man. It's all over the place. It's known.
Honors to the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. Islam.
He's the GOAT.
Yeah.
He's the GOAT. And that's it.
Straight. He's the Capricorn.
It can't be coincidence. It just can't be.
It can't be.
It can't, man. It can't. Man's a Capricorn. That's crazy.
Honors to the board. Let's close out and
all right.
We'll say peace and love for this one.
We'll go more, yeah, man. All right. Peace.
There's a lot more. Face the east. 5 on the left, 2 on the right. Allah, the Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day, through her holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali. Ashe, Islam. Islam more. Give thanks again.
You too.
Give thanks again. Peace and love to all the more in the chat. You already know we'll catch up in the week.
Yep.
Once again.
We'll be back.
Peace, Moors. Islam.